Founders Park Media and Samurai 7 Books presents Moonbase Rogue, Book 3 of the Viper series, written by Mark Caldwell-Jones, read by Play AI. Part 6, Terminal Frost. Chapter 20. As the small de Havilland Canada Twin Otter aircraft dropped out of the shrouding cloud cover, Natalie Nicks pressed her face to the icy window, her breath fogging up the glass. The rugged aircraft, a stalwart of Arctic travel with its stout wings and sturdy landing gear, seemed barely larger than a speck against the vast wilderness below. She took in the desolate landscape of Devon Island stretching out beneath them, an alien expanse of craggy rocks and ice. The biting chill seeped into the cabin, a constant reminder of the brutal cold outside. You weren't kidding about the harshness. It's like a moonscape out there. James Rollins, who personified the handsome hotshot pilot, sneaked a glance over his dark aviators and chuckled at her observation. That's exactly the reason this was Delta Black's testing ground for Luna 1, he mused, a playful southern lilt woven into his words. He threw her a cocky grin, his green eyes twinkling with mischief. Here, you understand why the moon wasn't made for our kind, he said, sweeping his gaze over the horizon. Humans couldn't last more than a few minutes exposed to these conditions, and that's why nearly every major space program on Earth wants access to this testing facility. But why the hell would Chimera come out here? Nicks wondered, shaking her head in disbelief. That's a very good question, he replied. I doubt she's on vacation. The trip had allowed Nicks to fill Rollins in on all the events of Buenos Aires and Hong Kong. The only thing she hadn't yet divulged was her special bionic abilities. In turn, he explained Space Force's ties to Devon Island. This testing site is equipped with almost all the same advanced technology that's on the moon, including a satellite uplink we used during the Moonbase's construction. However, once the crews settled in and the base became operational, all that equipment was decommissioned. That doesn't explain why someone running around with stolen DNA would be out here. It makes zero sense, unless they desperately need some of your Luna 1 tech. It's all mothballed and should be inoperable. However, there is one small thing I haven't told you. Mission Control did pick up a transmission to Luna 1 and immediately suspected it came from the Devon Island uplink. We inquired, and Ryder Astronautics, the company that built most of the equipment out here, assured us that it was impossible. Nicks's eyes widened, and she turned to glare at Rollins. Then you heard me mention Devon Island as a potential target. That renewed your suspicions. Exactly. I figured it couldn't just be a coincidence. I had to see for myself. Interesting. It looks like our separate issues just merged into one big confusing mess. Nothing that two of us can't handle, he said, flashing his movie star smile once again. We shall see, Nick said. At this point, she was hedging all bets. Rollins banked to the southwest, and their small aircraft descended over a 15-mile-wide bowl-shaped cavity, a spectacular sight from above. That's the Houghton crater, Rollins said. He pointed down at a mammoth scar that gave the land a definite moon-like quality, made from an ancient asteroid strike. Its sheer size was overwhelming, the crater's rim extending far into the horizon. Ice-capped ridges glistened in the sunlight. This seemed to be one of the most desolate places Nicks had ever been. Looks fun, doesn't it? Nicks raised a brow, challenging him. You're going to have to work very hard to make anything down there fun. Rollins chuckled heartily. I look forward to the challenge, ma'am. I bet you do, she laughed. Rollins gestured toward the landscape below, his face etched with a frown. See that? It wasn't here last time, he remarked, pointing out a new structure that stood out against the icy backdrop. Enclosed within daunting high fences, it was a sleek, industrial-style building. It was isolated, a good 10-minute walk from the hubbub of the main research center. Another landing strip, too, Nicks observed. Ryder Astronautics, muscling in on our testing grounds. House is impressed with him. The moon miner, right? Yes. I don't care for the guy myself, but his company is on the cutting edge of space technology. He's a major player. I'm sure that new building is to test more of his lunar mining tech. Nicks noticed guard towers positioned strategically around the buildings. Interesting, since there wasn't much beyond except desolate tundra. Why don't we poke the bear a bit? Can you land on the Ryder strip and taxi up to the new building? Nicks asked. Rollins flashed a toothy grin. I really like how you think. As the plane's engines throttled down, the propellers bit into the frigid air and the landing gear thudded into place. Rollins handled the controls with seasoned ease, guiding the small aircraft in a smooth descent. The plane's wheels skimmed the ground before Rollins expertly managed the touchdown. Once on the ground, he deftly maneuvered the plane down the tarmac, taxiing towards the new building. Rollins opened the hatch, allowing the biting wind to sweep through the cabin. Welcome to Devon Island, Natalie. Two men, each with rifles, approached the plane as it parked. Nicks stepped onto the airstrip, her boots crunching on the icy ground. She squinted against the blinding white of the landscape. Her gaze fell on the guards approaching them, their frost-covered uniforms sporting the logo of Ryder Astronautics. She noted their eyes filled with suspicion. Rollins greeted them, explaining they were here on Space Force business. The tallest guard eyed Nicks, giving her a long, hard look. Suddenly, we're a tourist hotspot, he quipped sarcastically. He turned toward the new building. Them Chinese boys beat you here by an hour or so. Chinese? Rollins wondered. Yeah, some slant-eyed general named Shang Fu with one hell of an entourage. He's here to see the boss. Boss man flew in at sunrise. Nicks cocked an eyebrow. Ryder? Who else would it be? So Ryder and General Shang Fu were here meeting. That was a very interesting surprise. Crack! The long bite of a rifle shot in the distance broke the silence and startled both Nicks and Rollins. What was that? Nicks asked. Warning shot. Chasing off the bears. Bears? You mean more than one? It's been an extremely harsh winter up here. You'll have to be careful, or you'll end up a late-night snack, the short guard said. Nicks laughed at the comment. Oh, it's no joke. We've had several men go missing in the last week alone, the tall guard said. Everyone who's outside the facilities carries a weapon now. Several men missing? Nicks couldn't believe it. 4 to be exact. Thought you might be here because of that. The whole camp's rattled. Nicks gave Rollins a concerned look. He shook his head in disbelief. They weren't expecting this. We've seen a hungry mother out here trying to feed her cubs. She's been circling the camp looking for food. We've had a few close calls with her during the last 2 nights. She's our main suspect. No trace of the men, though. The shorter guard looked past them as if he saw something in the distance and walked off back toward the new Ryder facility. His buddy followed. Don't go out at night, he shouted back over his shoulder. Nicks eye-checked Rollins, good advice, but going out at night was exactly what they had planned. Chapter 21. Chimera, Shangfu, and Ryder were nowhere to be found inside the Devon Island research station. After arriving, Nicks and Rollins had stowed their gear, eaten a quick meal in the mess hall, and then searched every square inch of the facility, coming up short. In fact, no one currently stationed there had seen anyone resembling Chimera. This wasn't unusual now that Ryder Astronautics had built their own facility, or so they had been informed. It seemed new Ryder's staff used the additional landing strip to cycle on and off the island in a very clandestine manner. If Chimera was still here, she was most likely hiding in one of the testing facilities outside the base, perhaps biding her time, preparing to kill someone. She was an assassin, after all. The first possibility was the Space Force building, where most of the tech used on Luna 1 had been tested. But Rollins had been assured that the building and its equipment had been mothballed after the real Moonbase had been successfully established. The more likely hiding place was the Ryder Astronautics building. There, Ryder was said to be testing lunar mining techniques and equipment, but all of that was speculation. Since it was a private company, no one connected with Space Force or the research base had been allowed inside. Now that most of the base was in bed, it was time for a bit of spying. Nicks explained the need to secure the biobank and the threat the stolen DNA might pose to national security. However, she didn't go into great detail. Rollins said he didn't need it. "I think this is bigger than some stolen test tubes. What I'm worried about is the connection your problem has to Luna 1. He explained how many engineering problems had been solved over the uplink with the help of the Devon Island staff. Could the bad guys have hacked that connection? Are there any conspirators here on the island? Nicks agreed the coincidence deserved their attention. She also understood Chimera was a cold-blooded killer who might bait them into a trap. This woman is dangerous. If you see her, shoot first, ask questions later. No problem, Rollins said. He opened his coat, flashing a handgun holstered at his waist. As Rollins pointed Nicks toward the door leading outside, he passed her a slim canteen he'd stowed inside his winter coat. Nicks took a sip and almost choked. For the cold, he grinned. Bad base coffee, mixed with a little Irish whiskey. You mean a lot of Irish whiskey, Nicks laughed. She didn't mind. The shot did the trick of warming her up. Outside, a new dusting of snow blanketed the landscape like a quilt. Harsh gusts of howling Arctic winds swirled the ice crystals around. Nicks cherished the Colorado winters of her childhood, but this weather was something very different. As they slogged toward the first building, they passed the canteen a few more times. They were 2 shots in when Rollins got a call on his encrypted satellite phone. Understood. You have my green light as well. He tucked the phone back under his parka. That was Vandenberg. Bad weather's coming. They're moving up the launch. When will it be? Nicks blew hot air over her hands while rubbing them together. 30 minutes. What? Damn. I guess I thought we'd be back in time for the launch. The Persephone's in good shape, and so is Quinn. It'll be okay. Don't you need to be there? Can't be 2 places at once, he shrugged. Plus, this is important. If Chimera's syndicate is as bad as you described it, we need to know how they are involved with the Moonbase. The fact that they have their top assassin here worries me more than the launch. Agreed. Nicks was grateful someone else was seeing things her way. Come on, he said, putting away the canteen and picking up his pace. Let's track this bitch down. Since the Space Force building was closest and Rollins had access, they cleared it first. It was an open warehouse with several enclosed offices built near the center of the building. They moved toward the offices, weaving through a variety of equipment. The rest of the room was set up for testing robotic machines. The floor was covered in black rubber tiles along the edges and cordoned off in sections, each mimicking some kind of environment. One section resembled a movie set for a lunar surface, while another was set up with a rock wall and several drilling tools laid there. Beyond this room was a much larger space, twice the size of the previous room. It featured large vaulted ceilings that seemed to form a dome structure with a series of reinforced skylights. Computers, monitors, cameras, and workbenches with tools and machine parts filled the northeast corner of the space. Almost all the equipment was covered in vinyl sheeting. Rollins seemed most interested in the central hub where the communication equipment was stored. This shouldn't be here, he said. He pointed down at a black cable. Plus, all of this equipment is powered on and warm. Someone's definitely been using it, but not from this building. This cable is an extension, routing all the comms out to another location. He followed the cable through the space until it snaked through a hole in the back wall and continued outside. Where the heck is the other end? Nicks asked. Best guess? Rollins said. Ryder's new building. Nicks nodded. Let's go. Sticking to the shadows and with one eye on the cable, they left the Space Force facility and headed out to the Ryder building. Nicks stopped and listened, waiting for her bionic ears to attune to any unusual sounds. "There don't appear to be any guards," Nicks whispered. She scanned the ground for footprints, but found none. "That's very strange," Rollins said. "They were all over us this afternoon." They moved on toward the first door. Nicks found the door locked. "Let me try the default Space Force code," Rollins said. He typed it into the keypad, but the locking mechanism flashed red. No such luck. "Damn," he said, stepping back. "Let's look for another way in." "Let me try it one more time," Nicks said. She stepped up, twisted the handle bionically until the locking mechanism broke, then gave way, and the door swung open. "Must be our lucky night," she shrugged. Rollins' eyes widened as he marveled at the busted lock. "Something tells me locks aren't the only thing you can break," Rollins whispered. Nicks gave him a mischievous smile and stepped inside. Rollins unholstered his handgun and followed her. The Ryder building was laid out similarly to the Space Force One, but it housed high-tech mining equipment. It contained earth movers, specialized pressure suits, and drilling tools that used lasers. The room was warm and unusually humid, a sharp contrast to the previous building. A very dim emergency light in one corner of the structure emitted a red glow, just enough to weave through the area. Moving past the mining equipment, Nicks immediately recognized a row of machines she'd seen in Hong Kong. Thick bundles of wires emerged from the egg-shaped pods, snaking across the walls into junction boxes before continuing to the next one. It gave the impression that the machines were all connected. They reminded her of something from Star Wars, specifically the tank that helped heal a wounded Luke Skywalker. Although their lids were made of opaque glass, she could see at the right angle dark liquid swaying ever so slightly inside. One pod was held open by a single long hinge. Steam wafted from the edges of the viscous liquid remaining in the tank. It gave the room a peculiar smell, a mixture of machine oil, paint thinner, and a honey-like sweetness. What the hell is all of this? Nicks hoped Rollins had some answers. "I don't know. I've never seen these machines before," Rollins shrugged, "but they give off really bad vibes." As they moved past the pods, the muted sounds of an intense argument filtered through the air. The conversation alternated between English and Chinese, the tones heated and fierce. One man's thunderous baritone seemed to make the very air tremble. A woman's voice crackled through what must have been a video feed. Her defiance was palpable, even through the digital distortion. Nicks and Rollins exchanged a glance. They were eavesdropping on a confrontation they had not expected. Had they found the people they'd been looking for? They moved closer to the discussion, which was taking place inside another section of the building, a place furnished with more traditional lab equipment. From their new vantage point, they couldn't see the lab or who was speaking, but the fragments of conversation were now easier to hear. "Do not send Dao my way," the woman declared in broken English. "I claim Luna 1 and the entire Conrad crater as sovereign territory. Attempt any landing, and more will die." Nicks noted the name Dadao, her brows furrowing as she tried to piece together the growing list of conspirators. "Do you see Ryder?" Rollins whispered. "Or that Chimera woman?" "No. I can't make out any faces," Nicks said in a hushed voice. "I'll circle around to the other entrance. We can take them by surprise." Without waiting for a response, Rollins disappeared back the way they'd come. Nicks dared to press on, her heart pounding as her implants amplified the conversation. The older man was again raising his voice at the woman on the video feed. They argued in Chinese, and it was clear they were having a falling out. Behind her, the shadows stirred, and she wondered if it was Rollins coming back. No such luck. 3 men, a security team of some kind, moved like ninjas through the equipment. An obvious attempt at surprising her. She played dumb for a few moments as they drew closer. Then, with uncanny speed, she attacked the nearest man, delivering a powerful elbow strike to his temple. The impact, augmented by her cybernetics, was devastating. The man was unconscious before he hit the ground. The second man fired his handgun wildly, narrowly missing Nicks. The bullets ricocheted off the nearby equipment. With a roar of defiance, she sidestepped him, used a grappling move to throw him off balance, and, with a surge of bionic strength, flipped him over her shoulder. His head collided with the concrete floor with a sickening sound that hinted at a fatal strike. The third man retreated towards an exit. Nicks leapt up and over several pieces of equipment and tackled him. As she grappled for control, the man panicked, attempting everything to get away. Nicks grabbed him by the throat and pinned him to the floor. "Who do you work for?" she demanded. "Who's on the other end of that video feed?" The man sputtered answers in Chinese until the interrogation was abruptly cut short by the appearance of another group of men. They had somehow captured Rollins. 2 handguns were pointed dangerously at his head. Perhaps for the sake of strategy, anger at being surprised, or both, Nicks turned back to her captive and punched the man in the face, knocking him out. "Good evening, Ms. Nicks," the man in charge said. "I must say it's quite the honor to meet you. I just wish it was under more hospitable circumstances." The deep bass of the man's voice confirmed it was he who had been arguing. "Until I know your name," she stood up to face the man and his entourage, "you can call me Captain Nicks." The older man smiled momentarily at her display of strength, then narrowed his eyes. He spoke with an Asian accent. "Yes, of course. Forgive my etiquette, Captain. We in the Chinese military insist our titles are respected properly as well," he said. "To that end, let me introduce myself. I'm General Shao Shangfu. Perhaps you've heard of me. I oversee the military space program for the People's Liberation Army." She eyed Rollins, who winked one of his gorgeous green eyes. The other was rapidly swelling. Seemed he had been in a bit of a fight. "Yes, General Shangfu," she replied. "I'm familiar with your name. You're a bit far from home, aren't you? What brings you to Devon Island?" "That's a very complicated story. Suffice it to say, I came here to meet with Mr. Martin Ryder, the famed space pioneer responsible for Ryder astronautics. Our government has an interest in some of his specialized technology." What a coincidence. My partner and I hope to talk with him as well. Would this concern a certain crisis on the moon, for instance, a problem at a secret moon base? Shangfu asked. "You know we can't divulge that information," Rollins growled. "That's too bad. Perhaps if our 2 nations had been working together from the beginning, such tragedies would never have happened." Shangfu shook his head sympathetically while tisking his tongue disapprovingly. "Unfortunately, as it stands, neither of us got to Martin Ryder first." "Where is Mr. Ryder?" Nicks asked. Shangfu's eyes were cold and calculating, but his voice carried a hint of genuine regret. "Unfortunately, he's dead," he said. "You killed him?" "No, not us. A rogue element, one of our former military scientists, ordered his torture in an attempt to take control of his moon-based technology. While it seems she was successful, we interrupted her plot. One way or another, this crisis will be resolved. I'm going to make sure of that." "You can't interfere with our space programs," Rollins snapped. "Even being here right now, at one of our installations, is espionage at the least, tantamount to declaring war." "Yes, you are right, Colonel. But I decided doing so is a risk worth taking. If someone doesn't act quickly, a war between our nations will be the least of our worries." Nicks did not know what that meant, but it sounded extremely ominous. One of Shangfu's men circled around her, brandishing his handgun. Another shoved a gun into Rollins's ribs, and Shangfu beckoned them both to follow him toward the nearest exit. Outside, the snow had picked up, and visibility was limited. Nicks could only see a few feet in front of her. As they moved further into the biting cold and the falling snow, Shang Fu addressed Nicks directly. I'm aware you possess unique abilities, Captain Nicks. However, I suggest you don't attempt to follow us to the airfield. You two are now unarmed, and the bears in this area are very vicious. Shang Fu pulled his coat's hood up around his face and signaled one of his men with a casual gesture. Blow the lab, he said. The young man nodded, pulling a sinister-looking detonator from his pocket. With twisted courtesy, Shang Fu waved at Nicks and Rollins. Perhaps we should all move further away from the building. No, you can't destroy that lab, Rollins shouted. There are people in there. This is a much better solution for everyone, believe me, Shang Fu said grimly. In the blink of an eye, Nicks acted. With bionic speed, she propelled herself forward and snatched the detonator away from Shang Fu's henchmen. She hurled it far beyond their reach. General Shang Fu and his remaining men seized the moment for a quick getaway, racing toward the airfield, their footsteps and trail disappearing in the snow as fast as they were made. Nicks started after them, but Rollins stepped in front of her and stopped her. Let them go. I have a good idea where they're headed, he said urgently. There's something in the lab. Something you and your whole team will want to see. Chapter 22. Many hours later, most of the Reaper Force team, along with Colonel Rollins, stood in front of a wall of horrors. Everyone agreed they had never seen anything so grotesque in their lives. The lab's fluorescent lights cast an unforgiving glare on the terrifying display before them. A wall of bodies, 5 in total, hung suspended in vacuum-sealed plastic sacks, their forms distorted by the strange orange fluid that surrounded them. Nearby, 2 more corpses lay on examination tables, 1 man and 1 woman. The woman Nicks recognized as an aged Chimera, her features eerily transformed into those of an elderly female. She'd been shot in the head. The man was Martin Ryder. His lifeless body was still strapped to the table. 1 hand was missing several fingers. It was obvious he'd been tortured. The entire scene was something out of a horror movie, the kind that gnaws at the edges of your memory long after the credits roll. Nicks couldn't tear her eyes away, even though every fiber of her being screamed to look anywhere else. The air was thick with the stench of antiseptic, and something far more sinister, barely masked by the lab's other smells. Her stomach churned, but she swallowed the nausea, forcing herself to focus. Now it was obvious. The camp didn't have a bear problem. It was Shang Fu's rogue scientist. She had somehow orchestrated the murder of all the missing people. This is beyond monstrous, Nicks muttered, her eyes darting away from the ghastly sight. Good thing Quinn is already on the Persephone and doesn't have to witness this. She glanced at the vacuum-sealed bodies one more time, then turned away. She was ready to leave the whole damn place. It was too cold, and everything in this building gave her the creeps. My God, who the hell would ever do this? Mouse groaned. Considering her own crazy journey with military science, Nicks was not as shocked as Mouse seemed to be. Rollins stepped up beside her, his expression grim as he scanned the scene. Oh, it must have been this Fang woman we heard arguing with Shang Fu, Nicks said. We had intel on her, but I had no idea she was some kind of goddamn Dr. Frankenstein. This is horrifying. Yeah, and Shang Fu wanted to burn it all down, cover his ass. Luckily, thanks to you, that didn't happen. The explosives have been defused and disarmed, and the biohazard team will be here soon. In the meantime, we need to document everything. We can't leave any stone unturned. Mouse, looking pale and shaken, fumbled with a mask and handed it to Nicks. Here, Nat. It's mint-scented. The fibers block the odor of the corpses. Nicks waved it away. Believe me, you'll want one soon enough, he said. I'll pass. Let's just do what we have to do and get the hell out of here. Across the room, Byrne was standing beside one of the oval machines. I think I finally understand these things, he said. His fingers traced the cold metal surface, his brow furrowed in concentration. Nicks and Rollins moved to his side. They look like high-tech coffins. What are they really? Nicks asked. These pods are connected to the bags, Baron replied, tracing a conduit from the pod to the plastic wall of corpses. Fang created some kind of arterial solution that is flowing in and out of the bodies as they hang here in the matrix. I'm guessing the chemicals accumulate the various proteins and convert them into an amniotic solution. It's being pumped into the clone pods over here. Are you telling me she grew people in one of these pods? Nicks asked. Not just any person, Burns said, looking up to catch her eye. I think Chimera is a clone. Nicks felt the blood drain from her face. She was beyond shocked, but it made sense. Suddenly, all the oddities about Chimera's resurrection, those bewildered expressions when they clashed in Hong Kong. She hadn't been fighting the same woman. It had been two separate people. The realization was freaking her out. I think you're right, she murmured. My God, it makes sense. Rollins shook his head, rubbing his temples. This is getting beyond my pay grade. As crazy as it sounds, Burns said, pointing down at the pod again. This is an artificial womb, with artificial amniotic fluid taken from those poor souls hanging in the bags. Nicks felt a cold sweat break out along her spine. This stuff was getting worse by the second. So this orange liquid must be some kind of super fertilizer, Mouse said, piecing it together. Burn nodded. Yes, it's barbaric. The victims were essentially drained, turned into food for the new clones. Fang has been using this lab to perfect her methods. Rollins crossed his arms, his eyes narrowing as he took in the whole setup. But this wasn't good enough for her, was it? She's moved on, to the Godforge lab on Luna 1. It's the only place advanced enough to take this kind of experimentation to the next level. I think you're right, Burn nodded grimly. Which means she's not done yet, Nicks added. Whatever she's planning, the next stage is going to happen on the moon. Most of the team nodded. It seemed a safe conclusion to draw from what they knew so far. As Nicks pondered Fang's horrible plans, her eyes drifted to a door marked with a biohazard tag. It was practically begging to be opened, as if hiding more terrible secrets. She signaled to Fatima, and they moved toward it together. The door creaked as Nicks pushed it open, revealing a small, closet-sized room. The space was dark, the air thick with an almost metallic tang. Fatima's flashlight cut through the darkness, sweeping across the narrow shelves. Her beam stopped on something sleek and black, a high-tech casing. Natalie, it's the biobank, Fatima whispered urgently as she carefully pulled the device from its resting place. Finally finding the biobank should have been a victory. Pembroke and the higher-ups would be relieved. But in the midst of these horrors, it felt hollow, almost anticlimactic. Back in the main room, Mouse, who was now scanning the security camera feeds, made his own discovery. Guys, you need to see this, he said. Nicks hurried over to the console where Mouse's fingers were dancing across the keyboard. The screen flickered to life, displaying a recent video. It showed Chimera hunched over Martin Ryder, who was fighting to free himself from the examination table. Zhang Fu was right. Fang has gone nuts. She had Chimera torturing Ryder, Mouse muttered, almost in disbelief. But why? Fatima asked. Rollins leaned in, his face darkening as he listened to the footage. It's the Osiris. Fang wants the Osiris. What is the Osiris exactly? Nicks asked. It's an experimental terraforming system, very advanced stuff meant to create artificial atmospheres. Small modular satellite drones that can park themselves in lunar orbit wherever you want them. Jesus, are you saying she can attack the Persephone? If she has the activation key, yes. And from what we're seeing here, it seems she got that from Ryder. He was probably lured here for that very reason, Rollins said. Mouse forwarded the video, his eyes narrowing. Yeah, Look here, he said, pausing the video. This shows Chimera transmitting the activation code to Fang. Yes, that confirms it. She got one key, Roland said, his jaw tightening. But there are two. One to activate it, one to shut it down. The second one, the deactivation key, is missing. It's not on Chimera's body or in the safe, Burns said. Nothing like that is here. Nicks's eyes widened. Shang-Fu must have it. Mouse continued scrolling through the footage. Yeah, look, further in, behind... Here, Mouse said, pausing the video. Shang-Fu's men take something from the safe. I think it's pretty clear they killed her and took the fucking thing, whatever the hell it is, Fatima said. It's gone. Nicks frowned, the pieces falling into place. So, Shang-Fu's got the deactivation key. What's his play here? Is he working with Fang or against her? Hard to say, but look at this place. Rollins shook his head and gestured to all the corpses. Things have clearly gone sideways, but whether he's helping her or trying to stop her is anyone's guess. Nicks clenched her fists, frustration simmering. We can't take any chances. We need to make sure the Persephone can land safely on the moon, she said. What's the status of the mission? I just received an update, Rollins said. They completed their final lunar injection. They did an extended burn to speed up the trip. Should be in orbit soon. If Fang's in control of the Osiris, Quinn and the rest of the crew are heading into a trap, she said. Rollins met her gaze, his expression steely. Not if we turn off the system, he said. But there's only one way to override the encryption in time. Nicks nodded, her resolve hardening. She turned to her team. Then we need to find Shang-Fu and get that key. Part 7. Shine On, Crazy Diamond. Chapter 23. The Persephone. Dying was not how Lieutenant Colonel David Kirkland envisioned making history, especially in the dark, unforgiving sea of space, yet if he had to choose a place for his final moments, this was it. Kirkland had aspired to be an astronaut his entire life, feeling it was his destiny. He was born on a hot July day coinciding with the Apollo 11 launch from Cape Canaveral. This event sent the first team of astronauts, led by Neil Armstrong, to the moon. Kirkland grew up wanting to emulate those heroes. 50 years later, as the commander of the DARPA space vehicle Persephone, he had achieved that dream. Like Armstrong and Aldrin, Kirkland and his crew of 2 were an hour from setting foot on the surface. This time they planned to do more than plant a flag. They aimed to fight a battle, to rescue fellow astronauts. They weren't coming for a quick trip, but to make sure a permanent outpost on the lunar surface survived. There would be no news stories, magazine profiles, or press conferences. He would not become a household name. He would be fortunate if his mission was believed when finally declassified. However, Kirkland hoped this endeavor would fulfill the ideals of his favorite space-traveling characters, exploring strange new worlds and boldly going where no one had gone before. It was everything his little boy self had hoped and imagined a space adventure would be. Now, it was just a matter of landing. He flipped a switch, entered a heading into the orbiter computer, and adjusted the trajectory with the cockpit hand control, guiding the ship into lunar orbit. Good job, Commander, his co-pilot Maria Gates joked. You've managed to point us on a collision course with the moon. Kirkland's blue eyes narrowed, and he chuckled, the gray at his temples visible around his thinning hairline. The joke was amusing because everything was proceeding as planned. I'll get you down there one way or another, Gates, he laughed. Copy that. Gates responded with a warm smile. Her blue eyes flashed under her thick eyelashes. Sergeant Maggie Quinn chimed in. Hard to believe we'll be on the sodding moon in an hour. Hope someone had the sense to pack some gin. You're the engineer. I was hoping you could make the gin, Maria mused. This made everyone laugh for a few brief seconds, marking the last moment free of tension. What the hell is that? Gates gasped, unable to hide her shock. Quinn noticed it too, twisting in her seat to get the best view. "Commander, we have a problem," Gates shouted. "There's something intercepting our flight path. Can you see it?" 2 o'clock, off our starboard bow." Kirkland, who normally would make a quip about every side of the spaceplane being starboard, stiffened and then cursed. A disc-shaped object was flying straight at them. "Mission Control, we're seeing an unidentified object in lunar orbit," he reported. "It just crossed into Persephone's trajectory, locking main infrared sensor at zoom 1, 10 degrees below our main axis. Do you see it?" "Persephone, this is Vandenberg. Can you switch the sensor to TV mode and zoom to ×10? We need more detail down here." "Roger that," Kirkland responded. He signaled to Gates, who adjusted the settings on their sensor pod. "It has to be some kind of satellite." "It definitely looks man-made," Quinn added. "But whose satellite?" Gates questioned. "The Chinese." The object was the quintessential UFO, an oblong, pill-shaped mass, silver in color. But as Gates magnified the image, they realized it wasn't solid. "What the bloody hell is that?" Quinn growled, observing that she could see the stars behind it. As if aware it was being watched, the UFO suddenly shifted into a denser configuration, taking the shape of a giant arrowhead and accelerating forward. "It's swinging into our flight path," Gates announced. "Azimuth is 10 degrees off our main axis. Mission Control, please advise," Kirkland called out. Vandenberg was slow to respond, and when they did, the signal was weak. "Persephone, we've lost." The broadcast was abruptly cut off by a piercing burst of distortion, and white noise filled the capsule's speakers. "Something is interfering with the signal," Gates reported. "It's speeding up, Commander," Quinn shouted. "And it's not changing course." "I'm taking evasive action," Kirkland declared, rotating the craft 90 degrees. "Firing thrusters." The Persephone veered away from its original path, the crew bracing themselves as the sudden thrust pressed them into their seats. "Hang on, everyone," Kirkland warned. He then tilted the Persephone to port, a full 90 degrees, propelling the ship toward the moon's surface. The UFO, moving faster than expected, zoomed past them. A jaw-rattling clang reverberated through the spaceplane as it collided with the object. "Damn it! How the hell did it hit us?" Kirkland shouted. "I gave it plenty of room." Gates turned to look at Quinn. "Is there any sign of a breach?" "None that I can detect," Quinn replied. "All sensors indicate we're still pressurized." "Our comms are still down," Gates added. "And that thing is turning around." "That's impossible. We're moving at almost 4,000 miles per hour, Kirkland protested. "It's doing it," Quinn confirmed. "I see it as well." Despite his disbelief, Kirkland saw the UFO coming back for another pass on their monitors. It adjusted its trajectory, setting a direct collision course with them. Then, "It's changing its shape," Gates observed. "Flattening out, widening its surface area," Quinn noted. "You'll have to outrun it, Commander. If it passes us again, we'll take damage," Gates advised. Kirkland glanced at the rear sensors and quickly devised a new strategy. He spun the Persephone over, aimed its nose toward the moon, and fired the thrusters in a long burst, attempting a dramatic loop to evade the UFO. However, the UFO anticipated the maneuver. Pieces of the strange craft broke away and accelerated, overtaking the Persephone, hitting the hull like a barrage of bullets. The spaceplane spun out of control, tumbling wildly. Alarms blared ominously. Quinn reached for the nearby comms panel but was quickly overwhelmed by the centrifugal force and passed out. In seconds, Gates did the same. Fighting against the encroaching darkness, Kirkland focused all his effort on regaining control. Chapter 24. Las Lajas Station. Natalie Nicks sat back down in her jump seat after checking the map on one of the Ares monitors, her eyes briefly scanning her team. The aircraft was cruising at top speed and at the highest altitude possible, heading for their next destination. There had been no time to waste. The entire next step of their plan had been devised on the fly, literally. Now, many hours after leaving Devon Island, they were gliding smoothly over the South Pacific, preparing to cut through Chilean airspace as they headed for Argentina. Pembroke had informed Byrne that he had secured approval for the flight plan through the Pentagon's back channels. They wouldn't need to worry about any interference from the two countries. In fact, Argentina welcomed the operation. Despite the good money China had paid for the base's lease, their lack of candor about their activities had eroded trust. They were just as anxious as Reaper Force to know the true nature of the secret operation. "Let's go over this one more time before we execute," Byrne said, activating a large touchscreen. The display showed their target, a Chinese-owned space science installation near Las Lajas, a small town in Neuquén Province, Argentina. Las Lajas, nestled in a valley surrounded by the Andes Mountains, provided a strategic location for maintaining the base's secrecy. The facility sat alone in the center of 500 acres of rugged Patagonian desert. Its isolation was further ensured by the surrounding rolling hills and sparse vegetation, making it a perfect hideaway for clandestine activities. The harsh, arid climate and the area's remote nature added an extra layer of security, keeping prying eyes at bay. General Shang Fu had been easy to track. They knew he frequently visited Las Lajas. Chan Lo's laptop confirmed this. But it was Rollins who had tracked the flight from Devon Island and Shang Fu's movements afterward. There was no doubt Shang Fu was here. The more important question was whether Nicks could get into the facility and secure the Osiris deactivation key. Byrne pointed out the guard towers and security gates. The declared reason for the base is peaceful space observation. That may be correct. I don't know how it would be possible to do much else. Even though it's isolated, there's nothing here but dorms and buildings. Basic construction. There doesn't seem to be anything of significance going on. He zoomed in on some details of the security. However, the base is fortified. First, it sits out in the open. There's no cover for miles. You have a 12-foot barbed wire fence around the whole perimeter, and the DIA says we need to be on the lookout for other high-tech anti-intrusion devices. There could be laser tripwires and ground sensors. He pointed at a ridge line overlooking the western fence. "We'll divide into 3 teams," he said. "Fatima, you'll take the sandbug and set up overwatch. This gives you sight lines on the main gate and the tower. You should be out of reach of their sensors, but be careful." Next, Byrne focused on the middle of the base, where a 20-story communications tower with an antenna stood. There was also a 35-meter diameter dish next to it. He pointed at the tower. "Nat, this is your target. You need to get into this structure and hook up Mouse's piggyback to their computer system. That will scrape the deactivation key code from their database, if his team has uploaded it, that is. Otherwise, you'll need to find Shang Fu himself." Nicks nodded. A simple enough mission. The geeks at the DIA say these Chinese scientists may do basic radio astronomy, but they could easily hide illicit data in their transmissions, or even add encrypted channels to their regular frequencies. Shang Fu could be communicating with Fang that way. We'll know for sure once the piggyback is up. When that's connected, Mouse will confirm it's working, then you'll radio for exfil. "And where will you be?" Nicks asked. "I'm staying on the Ares," he said, "and serving as backup for Fatima if she needs it." Fatima shook her head. "Not likely." Everyone chuckled at the dry response. "And how do I get in?" Nicks asked. Byrne pointed at the image on the screen and then at a location on the map overview. "Coming in from the west over these foothills would be the best. I could jump the fence, but if they have tripwires or ground sensors, that's no good." Byrne agreed with a nod. "We've got you covered. We'll send you and Mouse in via the Skywing." "Say, what?" Mouse flashed a look of shock. When were you going to tell me that? Approximately 2 seconds ago, Burns said with a slight grin. I didn't want you puking on the flight over here. You guys understand the mission? Byrne asked. We need everyone to follow the plan to the letter. Invading this base is a serious provocation. Even though Shang Fu's raid at Devon Island provoked this, we don't want to start an unnecessary war. Mouse raised his hand like a frightened school kid. I don't think Natalie needs me tagging along. I'll only get in her way. That's probably true, Nick said. But I need your expertise. You know how to hack into the communication tower and set up the piggyback quickly. I don't know the space program or equipment like you do. Plus, you speak the language, Fatima added. What? Mouse's mouth fell open. I'm Korean, not Chinese. Fatima gave him a deadpan look and shrugged. What's the difference? Oh Jesus, can someone get this woman cultural sensitivity training? Fatima pulled out her sleek pistol, which she'd been cleaning, and placed it on the table. Is this sensitive enough for you? Mouse laughed briefly, then the next wave of anxiety hit him and the smile faded. Seriously, guys, I'm the guy in the van, not the guy on the glider. You just got promoted, Burns said, and slapped his old friend on the back. Soon, the Ares settled into a high-altitude circular flight path, taking a wide arc around the base. About 5 miles out, the Ares opened its hatch mid-flight. Nix stepped up to the edge with Mouse in tow. The Skywing's spring-loaded struts were folded down into its deployment configuration, the whole contraption strapped to Nix's back like an oversized backpack. Mouse stepped forward and worked with Nix to get himself into the tandem harness, which held him to her chest, similar to what one would see in parachute jumps. He looked sick. It's too late for puking, she said, pointing her finger at him like a mother scolding a child. He swallowed hard and stepped closer so that she could finish strapping him in. She cinched the chest straps one last time and slapped him on the helmet. You ready for the ride of your life? Don't kill me, please. Trust me, it's a piece of cake with a cherry on top. Then she bionically jumped off the lip of the Ares into the darkening sky. Nix and Mouse dropped in rapid freefall, Nix's arms and legs stretched out in her skydiving pose, trying to level out. Mouse attempted a linguistic record by extending the word shit into the longest syllable his vocal cords could manage. The piercing scream, amplified by his headset and transmitted into Nix's bionic ears, crippled her ability to concentrate. She gave him a rabbit punch to the ribs to shut him up. It did the trick, momentarily silencing his scream, just in time to hear the Skywing activate its mechanism. It took place over and over. After a quarter hour, Kit slipped the mouse from his headset and transmitted it to the First, the main strut telescoped out of Nix's backpack vertically along the line of her body. Then several similar carbon fiber struts expanded from the central post like the rib bones of some strange skeleton. Seconds later, a specialized nylon fiber skin shot from the top of the spine, scrolled down the ribs, and locked into place at the tail of the device. There was a jerk and a foof-whoomp sound as the air caught the new wing, and Nix and Mouse rose several hundred feet rapidly before the last piece of the mechanism shot out over Nix's head. This piece formed a kind of nose for the Skywing that, in profile, looked very similar to a bird's beak. A final carbon fiber post dropped out of the nose. Nix grabbed it, clicked its central button, and a set of 2 long handles fell into place. All of this happened in mere seconds, and after the Skywing system was fully operational, Nix was flying a state-of-the-art tactical glider. She pushed on the steering handles and banked starboard, dipping the nose so that they began losing altitude. In short order, they were closing in on the western ridge, their first visual target showing they were on course to intercept the Chinese base. The Skywing was a dream to fly. The air wasn't too cold, and Nix briefly considered turning the glider and sailing off in the other direction just to enjoy the exhilarating experience. However, her teammates were depending on her, so she steered the handles of the wing, pointing it toward the most prominent feature on the base, the communication tower. From her vantage point, it appeared to have been built to resemble a church bell tower, probably to disguise its true purpose. As they approached, Nicks noticed the ridge of hills was actually a series of dirt mounds. Vast stretches of plowed earth in long rows rose so high they could easily be mistaken for natural formations. She glided by, wondering what the Chinese might be constructing, when the fence line came into view. She leaned into the handle, causing the wing of the glider to bank to port. She sailed along, parallel to the fence line, until she saw a suitable landing spot behind the radio dish. The dish cast a round shadow, as dark as midnight over a large section of the ground behind the tower. This area was set off from the rest of the main buildings and was out of reach of most of the perimeter lighting. Nicks decided it was her best target and flew the glider up and around for her final approach. Mouse's anxiety returned with a vengeance as they prepared to land. Nicks could feel him trembling. She didn't fault him for that. It was a normal reaction to the massive dose of adrenaline surging through their bodies. She had a slight tremor herself, but being a former Army Ranger, jumping from aircraft was something she had plenty of experience with. Mouse lacked the training, and that became painfully clear as she navigated toward her landing zone. He stiffened and twisted his body to the right just as Nicks banked left. This threw them off balance and forced her to compensate by oversteering, trying to maintain her turn. She cursed at Mouse, making it worse. Realizing he was causing a problem, he swung himself in the opposite direction. This time his movement was too fast for Nicks to correct. The nose of the glider dipped forward, and they went into an uncontrolled spin. They spiraled straight toward the tower. The centrifugal force and the sheer power of the air pushing against the glider wing made pulling out of the spin almost impossible. It would have spelled doom for most, but Nicks wasn't just any pilot. Using her cybernetic strength, she reached up, grabbed the main wing strut, and pulled down while pushing up on her steering handle. She squeezed, almost bending the metal itself, forcing the wing into a steeper dive. That momentary adjustment allowed her to pull out of the spin. Seconds later, she regained control. Averting disaster, the glider swooped past the tower. A narrow miss, but nevertheless a clean run. Back into her path, toward her chosen landing zone. Slowly, she dipped the wing back, lowering the altitude and braking their speed until, finally, they slipped inside the dish's dark shadow and landed with such elegance it seemed they'd floated down on fairy wings. Both Nicks and Mouse let out a deep sigh of relief. Chapter 25. Luna 1. Outside the prying eyes of the Moonbase's security cameras, Cyrus Kilgore and Juno Garrick huddled together in the shadowed recesses of a seldom-used stairwell. Kilgore's gaze was nervous and wild, his nerves clearly frayed. "We've been here long enough," Kilgore said abruptly, his voice low and urgent. "I'm heading back to the outpost." "What? No way, man. That's not the deal we made." Garrick shifted uncomfortably, a frown creasing his brow. "Yeah, she's batshit crazy, but the money, it's beyond good. We'll never have to work again if we just see this through and get home." Kilgore's hand shot out, pressing firmly against Garrick's chest, pinning him momentarily against the cold wall. "Don't you see? If you've got a pair of balls, this witch wants them for her goddamned experiments. She's killing all the men, and she'll do the same to us when she runs out of product." Garrick's eyes narrowed, defiance flaring momentarily. "I'm not about to be a pussy about it. If she turns on us, we can handle her." With a grimace, Kilgore pushed harder, his other hand fishing out a small recording device. He played a secret recording. Their voices were low, and between the static, the unmistakable tone of Fang taking orders was audible, but not from her expected employers. "She's not working for the Chinese like we thought, you stupid fuck," Kilgore hissed, his voice laced with disgust and fear. "She's working for something much worse." The recording ended with a chilling order that made Garrick's blood run cold. Kilgore's eyes locked onto Garrick's, fierce and unrelenting. "Now, we both leave at the next chance we have, or I'll kill you in your sleep and leave your corpse for the witch to cut up." Kilgore's tone left no room for argument. "What's it going to be?" Chapter 26. With the Skywing hidden away, Nicks and Mouse headed for the base's communication tower. They reached the western entrance without any problems. In fact, the entire base seemed dead. Zero security. There wasn't a soul anywhere in sight. It almost seemed too easy. Flux quickly bypassed the electronic lock, and seconds later they were inside, moving quietly up what seemed to be the utility stairs. According to their intel, the computer servers were on the 3rd level, where the electrical power from the base entered the tower. They hoped to find Mission Control, General Shangfu's office, or at least the place where the Osiris deactivation key was stored. But at the top of the stairs, they found a foyer with a hallway that led to another space beyond it. The foyer was completely empty, save for one junction box. Mouse opened it, found a normal row of breakers, but nothing else. There was none of what they expected. No communication equipment, no computer servers. There were only 2 fluorescent light fixtures and the empty shell of what should have been a busy space center. "What the hell is going on here?" Mouse whispered, spinning around. "There are no people here or equipment. In fact, it doesn't even look like it's ever been used." "Do we have the wrong building?" Nicks asked. "Or, worse, the wrong base?" They scurried down the hallway into the main space that comprised the 3rd level of the tower, and found it as bare as the foyer. The tower appeared to be still under construction, almost as if it were a movie set. The outer facade was completely finished, but the inside was bare metal studs and scant sheetrock. The entire structure was a shell. Nicks and Mouse heard noise echoing up from the ground level and, being careful to stay hidden, moved back down the stairs to the lowest level. They emerged to find the same thing, an unfinished shell of a building, as if construction had stopped mid-project, or as if it had been built as a fake. The only novel thing in the space was a service elevator. The sounds of metal clanking against metal continued to reverberate around the empty room. "It's coming from those grates," Mouse said, pointing past Nicks. Sure enough, in all 4 corners of the room were large openings covered by metal grills, about 4 by 4 feet. Nicks peered down into the dark and was assaulted by strange smells. Suddenly, large metal louvers some 5 feet below the grates opened wide, revealing a long black shaft disappearing below them. Then a massive gust of air, steam, and something that could only be called exhaust blew through the vents with enormous force. The tower suddenly felt like a sauna. "What do you think is going on down there?" Mouse asked. "That's a very good question," Nicks replied. She spun around, scanning the space one last time. "By the way, we haven't seen a single person. I'm starting to think this communication tower is nothing but a movie set." "But it's not just a facade," Mouse said, pointing up at the tip of the tower. "It's some kind of chimney." Nicks looked up in time to see a series of vents spiral open, allowing the exhaust to disperse at various levels. They looked at each other, then back down. The mystery gripped them harder. Nicks hit a button, calling the elevator. When the door opened, they stepped inside. There were several more unlabeled buttons, but one had obviously been touched more than the others. Nicks hit it, and they descended. Several seconds later, the elevator doors opened like the red curtains of a grand stage, revealing a functioning spaceport. Mouse and Nicks stared out into a cavernous facility, completely dumbstruck. "Holy shit!" Mouse exclaimed, so loudly that Nicks startled. She clamped her hand over his mouth, a bit too hard. A muffled yelp squeaked out from under her bionic fingers. "Shh," she cautioned. "You'll get us both killed." He winced at the suggestion, but his eyes continued to scan the giant complex. She pulled him, almost lifting him off his feet, and dragged him to a dark alcove some 10 feet away, ducking behind a stack of unused metal bins for cover. They watched in amazement at the discovery. The Chinese government had built a completely hidden, underground rocket launch complex, reminiscent of, yet much smaller in scale than, Vandenberg Air Force Base. Nicks realized the source of the huge berms of dirt she'd flown over. The complex, situated 8 stories beneath the desert floor, represented months, perhaps years, of secret, substantial effort, hidden from Argentine and American surveillance. The secret launch center buzzed with activity. Workers hurried to complete tasks, all wearing identical uniforms, flame-retardant coveralls, eye and ear protection, and matching helmets. This hub of activity contrasted with the quiet above ground. It was around 2 in the morning, yet here it was all hands on deck. Nicks listened with her bionic ears to the cacophony of worker shouts, electronic alarms, and Chinese announcements over the loudspeaker system. Amid the flurry of activity, they realized the guards, moving about in pairs, showed no concern for security breaches. Nicks wondered if that could offer them the freedom to move undetected. "Can you keep your mouth shut?" she asked, glaring at Mouse. Mouse nodded. "Okay. I'm going to let go. But remember, scream again, and I'll rip that tongue out. Got that?" He agreed with a muffled whimper, and she released him. Mouse wiped his mouth and whispered, "What the hell did we find, Natalie?" "You know more about this stuff than I do," she shrugged, "but it looks like they're preparing to launch that rocket." He agreed and pointed. "That thing is incredible. Do you realize that's the Dadao?" The mystery of the name was solved. The name was written in both Chinese and English, plain as day. "It's a space plane, like the Persephone, but it's designed more like a space train. It has enough power to attach several modular capsules so they can take it to the moon. They had the concept illustrations in the DIA Intel package, but no one had known that it was operational. The Dadao, as Mouse would later explain, had been built by the Chinese Academy of Launch Vehicle Technology, an organization with very similar aims as DARPA. Their apparent masterpiece was now at the center of all the activity being prepped for launch. Nicks noticed the air in the launch center was cool and damp, and there was a kind of rotten sulfur smell, with a metallic taste when you breathed in. She glanced up at the massive, retractable bay doors looming above the Dadao, their heavy metal panels locked tightly in place. She assumed those doors would slide open when and if it was time for the launch, revealing the sky beyond. She was amazed the Chinese were about to set off a controlled explosion within this space. How would the exhaust be vented? Where would the heat go? Then she noticed the heat deflector shields clacking back and forth, as if they were being tested. Large steel vents opened, revealing dark tunnels rising toward the surface. "I think that's what we saw up above," she said. "They're using that fake tower as a big exhaust pipe." Mouse nodded and pointed at the massive steel structure next to the rocket. "That's the Launch Assembly Tower on the right side." "And you know what that is on the left?" "No, I have very little idea what I'm looking at." "That's why you're here," she reminded him. Mouse scanned the launch pad and carefully pointed out each section, describing it as best he could. "And that is mission control," he said, pointing to the last feature. "At least it looks like what I'd expect it to be." Nicks nodded. It made sense. The area was very similar to what they'd seen at Vandenberg. "Okay, that's good. Let's focus on that. Shangfu must be in there." Near the elevator was a rack full of coveralls and gear that included air filtration masks. They grabbed what they needed, hid again in the dark alcove, and dressed to match the working crew. She pulled her mask down over her mouth and suggested Mouse do the same. Disguised somewhat by the gear, they now felt more comfortable moving about. If she was right, all they needed to do was go up 4 levels and over to the other side of the complex. There was an entrance to a stairwell some 50 yards to their left. It seemed to be the least used set of stairs she could find. Since it was in the correct direction and in the darkest corner of the complex, away from most of the action, she decided it was their best option. "Come on, let's go find Shang-Fu. He has to be here." Nicks grabbed Mouse by the arm, looked around, listened intently, and, when she thought they were clear, hurried down the corridor to a set of stairs, praying it was the right move. China was notorious for replicating every brand, invention, or product America created. Apparently, this trend extended to the design of secret launch centers. Nicks was relieved to find they had emulated Vandenberg's setup, including several skyboxes and conference rooms above their main mission control floor. The stairs had been deserted, and they had encountered only one person on this level, a woman jogging while talking into a handheld radio, who didn't give Nicks and Mouse a second glance. The masks and protective eyewear proved to be an effective disguise. They hurried down the empty hallway and, using flux to bypass the security, slipped into one of the vacant skyboxes. The room closely resembled the one at Vandenberg, featuring a small conference area with a large central table and several chairs aligned along the expansive plate glass window. Nicks and Mouse crouched behind the chairs, peering over. This mission control buzzed with activity. Every seat was occupied, every computer active. The blend of radio chatter and periodic alarms lent a rhythmic calm to the chaos. The focal point was the stadium-sized monitors displaying video feeds of the rocket from various angles and data on wind speed, altimeters, and even detailed images of the moon, perially similar to those in Rawlins's data. Particularly striking were the large red graphs outlining the projected trajectories of the spacecraft. Stage 1 depicted a vertical ascent from their current location into orbit, while Stage 2, which captured Mouse's attention, suggested lunar ambitions. "Holy shit," Mouse whispered dramatically. "They're prepping this thing for the moon." Nicks's eyes widened. She noticed a man at the back of the room orchestrating the operations. It was General Shang-Fu. "Found him," Nicks pointed. Mouse was amazed. They watched the activity for a few more seconds. "This is a great view, but we need to hear what they are saying," Nicks said. "My lip reading is terrible," Mouse said, "but it seems obvious they're prepping for a launch." This confirmed the urgency of the situation. She knew she had to inform Burns so he could relay the information to the Pentagon. But first, their mission had to be completed. "The Osiris deactivation key, we need to get that now." Mouse nodded, scanning the mission control setup to trace the communications cabling. "The key isn't really a key. It's an encrypted program that, when activated, powers off the Osiris or makes it stand down. I'm sure Shang-Fu would have it uploaded into the Dado's computers, especially if they are headed to the moon. If we can hack into Mission Control's database, we should be able to get a copy for ourselves." He looked around the room. "I can't be certain where the central node is, but I'm sure these skyboxes are wired with some kind of connection to the rest of the computer systems." He scoured the room on hands and knees, examining the walls closely. Upon finding a networking port among the electrical outlets, he pointed it out. "Here. Connect through here. Flux can trace the networking architecture and point us to the proper node." Nicks placed her right hand over the computer port. "Flux, do your network thing and fast." Thin, hair-like nanofibers extended from one fingertip, weaving together into a filament and snaking into the computer port. After several seconds, a response came back. "Connection established. Decrypting security." The process took longer than Nicks had hoped, but soon Flux reported success. "Networking complete. What information do you wish to access?" "First, give me the audio feed," she requested. "Affirmative. Processing audio playback." "Me too," Mouse interjected, pointing to his earpiece, "and broadcast it to Mouse as well." Opening secondary port, duplicating broadcast wirelessly to Dr. Park's frequency. Soon, Nicks and Mouse were listening to Mission Control communications in clear audio. Damn, I wish I knew the language, Nicks said. I have no idea what they are saying. Mouse nudged her with a knowing wink. Good thing we know Flux can handle that. Translation doesn't just work on Fatima. A devilish smile appeared on Nicks's face. Flux, translate the audio in real time. Translation program initiated. After a brief silence for buffering, the audio feed resumed, with Flux English translation overlaying the original feed, giving an almost simultaneous interpretation. The source language faded into the background, with Flux translating both the words and the tone, providing a near-flawless understanding of the conversation. They listened for a minute before Nicks refocused them. Flux, find a place for us to connect this piggyback. After processing, Flux replied, The nearest junction box is on the south wall of this room. However, there's no external access. Mouse peered over Nicks's shoulder at the wall. What does he mean, no external access? Nicks inquired. It means they've concealed the box for security, Mouse explained, then winked. They don't want just anyone tapping into the node. They moved to the wall. Nicks's palm transformed, emitting a honeycomb pattern in a pulsing tone. Scanning the wall, she located the junction box with a ping. Junction box found, Flux announced. Nicks's hand reverted to normal. She then used her bionic strength to pierce the wall, revealing a steel box within. After exposing the box, she removed its lid, uncovering a nest of wires and cables. Mouse quickly installed the piggyback device. All done. It's up and running, he confirmed, nodding at Nicks. I'll scan their database for the Osiris key. Nicks and Mouse returned to their spot near the window to check on the action below. Flux, still feeding them the mission control audio, reported a new secure channel coming online. This conversation appeared to be a private one between the mission control leader and General Shang-Fu. Spying carefully from their hiding place, they spotted the stern, angry-looking, gray-haired man in his military uniform adorned with medals. General Shang-Fu, representing the People's Liberation Army arm of the operation, was berating the mission leader about the Dadao's payload, insisting on adding something the mission leader deemed unnecessary. The crew is highly trained, an elite team of astronauts able to handle these kinds of problems, the mission leader insisted. What you are suggesting is unnecessary, especially since we can deactivate the Osiris, General Shang-Fu countered, emphasizing the stakes. What I'm suggesting is that we only have one shot at making sure we rectify the problem. What happens if your crew can't get to the surface? Nicks and Mouse exchanged glances. What exactly did he mean? Did the Dadao team intend to land near Luna 1? General Shang-Fu seemed to confirm it. In addition, Shang-Fu seemed worried about a certain individual. Who is this Li Mang? Nicks asked Mouse. I don't think Flux is translating that correctly, Mouse responded. What do you mean? It's not Li Mang, it's Liu Mang. And what is Liu Mang? The best translation would be rogue. Fang. There was no doubt they were talking about Fang, and she was of great concern. General Shang-Fu's disdain for her betrayal was palpable. This is the problem as I understand it, Mouse said. They're angry at Fang, who has taken control of the base. She did it against orders outside the chain of command for her own reasons. It seems they are sending the crew of the Dadao to take care of her. Whatever that means, it's not clear. They keep dancing around the specifics. So they have their own space police just like Rollins, Nicks mused. Something like that. But the general isn't convinced they can get the job done. The launch director and the general were now huddled in one corner of their designated area, reviewing a video. The video played like police cam footage and was very grainy in spots. Eventually, it became clear that the footage was a satellite shot of the moon. Shang-Fu raised his voice again, shaking a finger at the images. We need to make sure this problem is completely contained. There can be no mistakes, he insisted. What if the deactivation key doesn't work and the Dadao is attacked? Look at what has happened to the Americans. The camera scanned the rocky gray lunar surface back and forth as it moved toward a small, jagged outcropping. Eventually, it became clear it wasn't a pile of rocks, but the crash site of the Persephone. Nicks and Mouse gasped simultaneously. The Persephone had crashed, apparently taken down by the Osiris. Nicks raised a hand to her mouth as if to suppress a scream. My God, had Quinn survived? What about the rest of the Persephone crew? There's only one option here, Shang-Fu said. We need to use ballistics from orbit. But what about the astronauts? The mission leader protested. With Fang in charge, they'll be dead soon enough. But we don't know that. Your plan would kill all the crew of Luna 1. Unfortunate collateral damage. And the crew of the Persephone? As far as the Americans know, that crew is already dead. But they're not dead, the launch director said. You see the footage. It is clear some survived and were taken to the base. Both Nicks and Mouse let out a collective breath at the mention of survivors. So it was possible Quinn had made it. But how to know for sure? They had to keep listening. The fate of a few astronauts is inconsequential. Fang poses too great a risk. First, there is the danger of her unauthorized science returning to Earth. The woman is not only capable of mutating viruses, but the entire human genome. Then there is the danger of the Osiris. That mad woman could easily reprogram it and place it into orbit around Earth, above our country, if she so desired. No, the dangers are too great. This is a crisis that our government cannot and will not be responsible for. Destroying the base eliminates all these dangers. And doing so in this manner leaves no evidence and no witnesses to this action. We must load the warheads. Then you mean? Yes, destroy the base completely. No survivors. Nicks couldn't believe what she was hearing. General Shang-Fu was ruthless? She opened a channel to Burn. Spartan, come in. This is Viper. Only static responded. She tried again, but couldn't raise Burn or Fatima. What the hell is going on up there? She muttered. This is not the time to go radio silent. We might be too far underground, Mouse suggested. But that didn't seem to explain it fully. Maybe the Chinese were jamming all radio frequencies. Nicks wasn't sure, but she knew one thing for certain. We have to do something, she said, looking at Mouse, her mind racing. What are you talking about? You mean get out of here? No, I mean do something about the Dadao. An alarm buzzed through the launch complex, and a commanding voice announced, Final launch preparations commencing. Begin engine chill. Transition backup flight system to launch configuration. Remember how I said, trust me? Nick stood up. I won't let anything happen to you, I promise. Yeah, right, Mouse said, rolling his eyes skeptically. How big is the crew for that thing? They've mentioned 3 names so far. I think that's it. And they're not on the rocket yet, right? They have to prep the engines first, go through a long checklist of final checks, then open those big-ass bay doors. While all that happens, the crew will be dressing in their pressure suits. And where would that happen? At this point, they'd have to be on the assembly tower, Mouse said, and pointed across the complex, back in the direction from which they'd first come. Over there. It's that enormous tower that looks like scaffolding holding up the rocket. Okay, good, let's go. We're running out of time, Nick said, pointing at the crew capsule. Mouse's eyes widened in horror. He looked from Nicks to the rocket and back again. You're crazy, he sputtered. Quinn is up there. She needs our help. Yeah, but we can't do anything about this. Not the 2 of us. Nicks wasn't listening to Mouse anymore. A group of America's best astronauts was up there in that moon base at the mercy of a mad scientist doing God knows what. Quinn, one of her best friends, was there as well. Now this insane Chinese general was going to bomb them all to dust. Not a chance. That wasn't happening. She grabbed Mouse and pulled him toward the door. Chapter 27. Luna 1. The cold hiss of processing air filled the airlock as Katrina Green fumbled with her pressure suit, her fingers trembling. Alarms blared, cutting through the Moonbase's silence. A terrible reminder that her time was running out. She glanced at the security monitor beside her. The screen flickered, showing 2 clones dashing down the corridor, their movements inhumanly quick. How Fang had managed to create those abominations was beyond her understanding. Maybe there was a way to shut down the Godforge lab and end this madness. Turner and Rogers would know, but they were most likely dead, and she was just a glorified space cop who had run out of ideas. It was time for a strategic retreat. Fang's ruthless command echoed through the base's speakers, cold and direct. Apprehend that astronaut at all costs. God damn, they're close, she murmured to herself. Move your ass, damn you. Her heart raced as she sealed her helmet, the final click a small victory. She bolted through the airlock just as it cycled, barely escaping as one of the clones reached the door. The woman's eyes, unnervingly calm, swept the area. A close call that sent a shiver down her spine. Outside, her boots crunched on the lunar surface as she sprinted toward the storage pod where the Lunamancer should have been parked. She rounded the corner, only to find nothing but disturbed dust and fading tracks where it had once been. Panic set in as she quickly accessed the pod's security system, her fingers flying over the controls. The monitor showed recent footage. Garrick and Kilgore at the vehicle, driving it away in a hurry. She had missed them by mere minutes. A crushing blow. With a sinking feeling, Green turned to head back, trying to figure out her next move. That's when she felt it, a sudden, sharp tug at her neck. A loop of steel wire, hard and unforgiving, tightened around her throat, yanking her backward with brutal force. She lost her footing as she was dragged through the thin lunar dust, her arms flailing for something to grab. The ground scraped against her suit as she tried to look back, only to see the clones closing in, moving with eerie coordination. She was being pulled back into the nightmare she had just escaped. Chapter 28. As they hurried to the launch assembly tower, Mouse explained that astronauts had to be dressed by a team of pressure suit specialists. He mentioned that the busiest part of the tower was the cargo module level, where the team's weapons were being loaded into the dado. However, to reach the crew, they would have to climb past that to the very top of the tower. As the astronauts were most likely getting prepped outside the cockpit. I don't think we'll get through their security. It's going to be tight the closer we get to the crew. We'll get through, Nicks said, offering no further explanation. Just follow my lead. Nicks and Mouse sprinted down the corridor, their footsteps echoing off the cold metallic walls. As they rounded a corner, they spotted a security guard, his voice low as he spoke into his radio. Without missing a beat, Nicks pivoted on her heels, closing the distance in an instant. She delivered a swift, calculated strike, knocking the poor soul out cold before he even had time to react. "Help me with this," she whispered urgently to Mouse as they dragged the unconscious guard into a dark corner. She unclipped the security badge from his uniform. Above them, the launch doors opened. Suddenly, a tide of fresh air washed into the space. They were running out of time. "We need to move faster," she muttered, her eyes already scanning for their next move. They ran onward, and as they approached the entrance to the tower, Nicks sped up and walked directly up to the checkpoint, avoiding eye contact with the 3 guards manning the post. She held up her badge and, without stopping, pushed Mouse past the checkpoint. 2 of the guards were busy talking on radios. The third briefly eyed Nicks, nodded, and waved her through. Seconds later, they were on the stairs, climbing up the assembly tower. They reached the cargo floor and found the rest of the stairs leading up to the cockpit were chained off. However, there was an elevator some workers were using to ascend higher. They watched as two men in clean suits, carrying handheld vacuuming equipment, exited the elevator. The doors closed, and the elevator went back up. Nicks and Mouse hurried to the elevator and pressed the button to call the car back down to their level. As they waited, Nicks scanned the tower and, about 3 levels higher, she could see glimpses of the Dadao crew interacting with a group of technicians. They were doing just as Mouse had guessed, getting dressed in their pressure suits, with each astronaut having about 3 techs buzzing around them like bees. They were so close. So close, in fact, that if she wanted, she might use her bionic power to leap to that level of the tower and take them out. But that would risk exposure and break her promise to keep Mouse safe. Nicks tapped her foot impatiently, waiting for the elevator to come back down. Another alarm sounded as the launch director gave a new command. Final launch window has been determined. Start final go-no-go launch poles. The elevator wasn't moving. Nicks hammered the button several times. "Hey, you two," a gruff voice said from behind them. "Stop right there." Nicks and Mouse turned around to find an older man dressed in an identical uniform to theirs marching up to them. 2 more guards were following him sheepishly. He appeared to be some kind of supervisor. "Shit, we're blown," Mouse whispered through his teeth. "Just stay calm," Nicks whispered back. "Where the hell are you going?" the man demanded. Flock's language module translated the words as fast as they were said. Nicks and Mouse didn't respond. She just pointed up at the crew level. "Damn you, new guys. You don't know what you're doing, do you? We need everyone 1 level down. There's last-minute cargo to load. Here, take this." He shoved 4 large duffel bags at them. "More backup pressure suits. Add these to one of the cargo boxes." He turned and pointed back at the stairs and waited for Nicks and Mouse to move. Nicks hesitated and looked back over her shoulder. The astronauts were now lining up to climb into the Dadao. In the next few minutes, the cockpit door would be closed, and that would be it. "Now!" the old man yelled again. "Get your asses down there!" Nicks and Mouse took the duffel bags and walked back to the stairs. They were attracting too much attention and had no choice but to comply. The old man watched them go. "We can't get to the crew this way," Mouse said. "I know," Nick sighed. "We'll have to try something else." Mouse glanced up at her with the same look of concern that seemed to be permanently frozen on his face. And they headed back down 1 level. Most of the workers had cleared out. There were only 2 more crates to load. Everyone was focused on the first, the largest of the crates. The second, smaller one sat in a dark corner waiting its turn. Another announcement echoed through the complex. "Close the crew hatch and check for leaks." Nicks and Mouse walked casually over to that corner of the platform and ducked down in the shadowy area behind the second equipment crate. Nicks glanced up and saw the launch bay doors were truly open, revealing the dark expanse of the sky. Maybe now their comms would finally get a clear signal. While she called Byrne, Mouse investigated a small access hatch on the side of the crate. He wanted to see what they were loading into the Dadao. "Flux, open the team channel." "Affirmative, channel open. Ready for transmission." "Spartan, this is Viper Actual. Do you read?" "Copy, Viper. Go for Spartan." Nicks filled in Byrne on what they had discovered. There was a shocked gasp on his end and a lot of cursing. "I'll get Pembroke and Vandenberg in the loop. Sit tight." Nicks looked at Mouse, who had opened the hatch. He glanced back at her and gave her a thumbs up. "Said sit tight," Nicks grumbled. She peered over the top of the crate, watching the Dadao crew strap the first box inside the cargo module. She waited for Byrne, all the while imagining Rollins and his Space Force team discussing their next steps. Sit tight? While a group of men in a comfortable conference room debated tactics? She was running out of time for that. Hell, it wasn't even the wise choice. The launch was imminent. The all-too-familiar impulse to take action curled around her spine. "Viper, this is Spartan. Over." It was Byrne with news. "Go for Viper. What's the plan? They've told us to stand down, Burns said. They're trying to contact the PLA through some back channels. Let them know we are aware of the impending launch. Ask them to call it off. Ask them? Nicks was incredulous. I want to be clear about something. That's not a bunch of flag-waving explorers climbing in that rocket. That's a kill team. They're about to blow the whole Moonbase to dust, kill Quinn and our astronauts, cover the whole thing up. This is bigger than us, Nat. You got the intel, now you need to get the hell out of there, and do it now before someone finds you. As soon as the overture is made, they'll know we are on site. They'll be looking for you, if they aren't already. We need to stop these guys, Nicks argued, and we need to do it yesterday. If the diplomacy fails, they said there are other options. They're already scrambling jets to intercept the vehicle if needed. You are talking hypotheticals. A jet isn't going to chase a 10,000-pound rocket into outer space. Most of all, this is Maggie Quinn we are talking about. We have to do something. Nicks could hear the voice of Pembroke, replying to Byrne, and his orders were clear. Tell Viper to stand down. Byrne came back on the radio. I know you heard that. Yeah, she did, but was it the right call? I'm not going to let them kill Quinn. She deserves our help. Plus, I know in my heart of hearts, Riza is behind this somehow. This has her signature all over it. You don't know that for sure, he said. What I know is that I need to intervene, she said. And you know it too. Don't you dare, that's an order. The intensity of the activity around the spaceplane was increasing. They were finishing storing the first crate. In a few minutes they would come for the second. Everything indicated it was time to move now. For the record, I'm forcing Dr. Lee Park to accompany me. He's made it clear he disagrees with my orders. Captain Nicks, Burns shouted. I'm ordering you to stand down. Flux, cut the comms. Radio transmission to Colonel Byrne terminated. Nicks reached for one of the large duffel bags and tapped Mouse on the shoulder. When he turned around, she threw it at him. It hit him in the chest and fell into his arms. Can we fit through that access hatch? What? Wait a minute. Why? His eyes widened. It's not like we can just get on that rocket. She winked at him and gave him a devilish smile. That's exactly what we're going to do. Part 8. Goodbye, Blue Sky. Chapter 29. The Dada. If they are willing to kill everyone on Luna 1, won't they kill us too? Mouse whispered his concern directly into Nicks's ear. They were squeezed together, too tight for comfort. Hot, sweaty, and nervous as hell that they'd be discovered any second. While Mouse continued detailing the many reasons they should reconsider, Nicks could hear a team of technicians working beside the container. She didn't mind putting her own life on the line, but dragging Mouse along sent a twinge of guilt through her mind. There was justification for taking him. He was a full-fledged member of the team now, and his technical expertise was more critical than ever. Flux might not work in space, but Mouse would work just fine. At least, that was the hope. Also, there had been no time to make any other decision. Had she left Mouse behind, he would have been easily discovered, she was sure of that, and that would have been the end of Mouse. Nicks set aside her guilt and tried to focus on their current circumstances. For now they were squirreled away inside the smaller cargo container, sitting on some carefully packed equipment. Engine chill complete. Seal all doors for launch. The announcements from Mission Control were increasing in frequency. The container vibrated, then moved. The men outside were pushing it into its proper spot within the Dado's equipment bay. There was a final, loud clang. The air pressure inside the capsule seemed to change. Mechanisms within their pressure suits seemed to compensate. With her bionic hearing, she heard the technicians giving the door a final check. Mission Control echoed this step of the launch process. Cargo module sealed. Crew module sealed. strongback retracting. Feeling sure they wouldn't be disturbed any longer, Nicks took off her glove and touched her hand to the floor of the cargo container. Flux, I need your help. We need to make sure that we are hidden from any video cameras pointed inside the cargo module. Flux worked its magic, eventually snaking its way into the wall of the capsule and finally joining with the rocket's computer system. Capturing 30 seconds of video now. Video captured. Running loop. And what exactly will that do? You may now move about the cargo capsule without being detected by the video cameras. Perfect. She smiled at Mouse. Let's get the hell out of here. Engine startup commencing. T-minus 20 seconds and counting. Nicks grabbed the edge of the access hatch and pushed it up and out. She held it open while Mouse crawled out the same way they'd both come in. There was one very important exception. The world had turned on its side. Mouse peered over the edge of the container and looked down into the capsule. The two storage containers were strapped to the sides of the fuselage with a web of black nylon straps. T-minus 15 seconds and counting. Ignition pre-check complete. Nicks scanned the capsule, trying her best to figure out how to prepare for the launch. It was obvious the cargo hold hadn't been configured for passengers. However, she found one seat. It was a jump seat of sorts attached to the fuselage with a spring-loaded hinge mechanism. A diagram bolted to the wall next to it showed the seat being used by astronauts in full extravehicular gear, normally used for spacewalks. She folded it down and pointed at it. You take this one, she told Mouse. I'll find another one. Are you sure? Mouse asked. Do it and hurry the hell up, Nicks whispered aggressively, then looked around for another seat. Unfortunately, it was the only seat of its kind. T-minus 10 seconds. Mouse, who was furiously strapping himself down, looked at her with concern. We can't do this, Natalie. It's crazy. You have no idea how the gravity is going to affect your bionics. And I'm sure as hell not trained for this. I'm about to puke from the nerves alone. Keep your voice down, Nicks snapped at him, then felt bad and added, We're going to be okay. You're safe in that seat. 9. Nicks continued along the wall of the fuselage, hoping to find a means of securing herself for liftoff. There was nothing here. She resorted to stealing a few nylon tie-offs fastened to the cargo box. They were strong but flexible lengths of mesh rope, interwoven with a chain of some kind. 8. She took a length of the cargo strap and fashioned her own harness, akin to what a mountain climber might use or what she'd remembered from rappelling in ranger training. A couple of square knots, 2 half hitches to secure the webbing to the tether ring just below the cargo box, then a knot called the bowline around her waist. The countdown seemed to speed up. 7, 6, 5. Oh, Jesus, this is really happening, Mouse said. He had his eyes closed. She'd never known him to be religious, but the guy was definitely praying now. Nicks had barely finished her makeshift harness when the loudest of the launch pad alarms sounded. Flux, who was still translating the crew comms, reported they had started the auxiliary power units in the rocket. 4, 3. Nicks cinched the straps as tight as she could, threatening to cut off the circulation in her cybernetic limbs. Main engine start, the crew commander announced. 2, 1, ignition. The engines roared to life, and the indescribable volcanic scream of the rocket's propulsion reverberated through the entire spacecraft. The vehicle lurched skyward as the spaceplane's muscular thrust shook the cargo module. Thankfully, her makeshift harness held her in place. Lift off. We have liftoff. As the Dudau climbed higher, gravity tried its best to keep its hold on everyone and everything inside the spaceplane. Nicks felt as if an elephant were sitting on her chest. The G-force pressure built rapidly, and the power of it was both disturbing and exhilarating. Leaving the gravitational field of Earth was not easily done. Stage 1, propulsion nominal. Telemetry nominal. Nicks looked up. About 10 feet above her, Mouse, eyes closed, gritting his teeth, muttering a mixture of curses and prayers, dangled from his jump seat, safely fixed to the side of the fuselage. As the rocket continued to climb, he held on for dear life, doing his best not to pass out. Next to Mouse, the cargo box, the one Nicks had stolen straps from, creaked and groaned under the growing pressure. It swayed ungracefully for several seconds, then shifted out from under its webbing. For a moment she imagined herself as an animated coyote getting flattened under a cartoon anvil. The crate was literally hanging over her, threatening to fall and crush her. Nicks watched it with concern. Suddenly, one of the key support straps snapped. The cargo box fell a few feet toward Nicks, only to be stopped by the web of remaining straps. She realized too late that the straps she'd taken to secure herself to the fuselage had been in place for a reason. As part of a 4-point restraint on the tactical support crate, it had ensured that the heavy box was secure enough to withstand the pressures of additional gravitational forces. Now, that delicate balance had been disrupted, and the box was loose. Then a second strap snapped, and the crate fell another few feet, stopping right above her. At this point, she could barely see around it. She had no idea how many straps were still holding it up. The crate was so close now she could reach out and touch the edge with her fingertips, but she had no leverage to do anything about it. She was pinned in place by her own harness and gravity. The Dadao continued its climb, and Mission Control made a new announcement. The tone was guarded and strangely ominous. Approaching maximum aerodynamic pressure. The spaceplane groaned and creaked as if a giant god were trying to crush it. The engines seemed to roar at their peak intensity, and the G-force was so strong, Nicks could barely move. That's when a third strap failed. The crate came down on Nicks, and suddenly she was fighting to stop it from crushing her to death. She braced her legs, locked her elbows, and pushed up. Her bionic power kicked in, and the massive crate held in place, but the metal was buckling. Nicks prayed her cybernetic limbs could withstand the immense pressure. At the same time, she didn't want to punch through the container, which would easily make things worse. "Natalie!" Mouse screamed. "Are you okay?" Nicks couldn't respond. It took every ounce of concentration and power to hold the crate aloft. Soon she was sweating, and her limbs trembled. Flux issued a warning, because her power was reaching a critical threshold. She wouldn't be able to last much longer. Now the force of gravity and the air pressure outside were exerting their combined power, pushing the rocket back down to Earth. Nicks knew any other person would be crushed to death at this point. She felt she was seconds away from that herself. Her arms were numb now, they were giving out. This was it. She screamed and pushed with all the power her bionic limbs could produce. The crate rose a fraction of an inch, then fell again. She felt herself blacking out. The spaceplane shuddered violently as the engine cycled through another furious roar, and there was a sharp creaking of metal straining against the forces of nature. The Dadawa jerked forward, faster, smoother, free of all resistance, and Mission Control made a more jubilant announcement. Max Q cleared. Main engine cut off in 5 seconds. Suddenly, as if she'd been dosed by a bolt of magic, Nicks could lift the entire crate and push it away from her. The crate rose above, as if it were lighter than air because now it was. They'd broken the chains of gravity. The Dadao was now in orbit. Miko, main engine cut off. Stage 2 telemetry activated. Nicks slumped over in her harness, totally exhausted, barely able to keep her eyes open. All her strength was spent. The crate continued rising. Somehow, the straps were pulling the container back into place against the wall of the cargo capsule. The webbing tightened around the crate once again. It was Mouse. He'd gotten out of his seat to help her. When he was satisfied the container was back in place, he pushed off the edge of the fuselage and sailed over to Nicks. "Nat, are you okay?" he asked. "I thought you'd been crushed." He grabbed her by the shoulder affectionately and stroked away the sweat from her forehead, then felt for a pulse. "I'm okay," Nick said. "I just need a minute, or 2, or 3. Mouse smiled. "Told you it would be easy," he joked. "Piece of cake, right?" Chapter 30. Natalie Nicks peered out through the porthole window of the Dadao, mesmerized. Beyond the veil of Earth's atmosphere, there was nothing else to do but stare in awe at the expanse of the universe stretching out into infinity. She wondered if her feeble human brain, even with its cybernetic enhancements, could process the grandeur of what she saw. The stars were brilliant, innumerable, and incalculable. The Earth spun round in its full glory, seemingly a million miles away, but close enough that she could recognize the familiar-shaped continents, once just pictures in a geography textbook, now vividly realistic, ringed in smoky white swirls of Earth's changing weather. The Dadao was just now leaving Earth's orbit. Yet, somehow, she could still sense the unseen life that pulsed on the planet's surface. And Luna, the Earth's mistress, basked in her own startling glory. She beckoned them with her mysterious, cold glow. "Come closer," she seemed to say. "Come closer." "Unbelievable," Nick sighed. Mouse echoed her sentiment. "This is so incredible." He watched with her for a few more moments, then he pushed off and floated across the cargo capsule. When he reached the opposite wall, he kicked off and did a somersault, spun several times, then stopped the rotations by spreading himself out like a starfish. He floated there a few seconds, then pushed off the nearby wall to do it all again. "I mean, wow. Wow, we're in space," he crowed. "Just like in the movies. Real, honest-to-God, outer space." Nix smiled for the first time since the mission had started. Seeing Mouse happy made her feel a fraction less guilty about bringing him along. Plus, she enjoyed the feeling of weightlessness, too, even though she noticed the experience had side effects, a bit of dizziness and a mildly upset stomach. She'd also developed a slight throbbing headache, no doubt from all the fluid in her body rushing upward. Or was it a result of using almost all her power to save herself from being crushed by the cargo box? A bionic hangover, perhaps? She shuddered, thinking about what would have happened if the Dadao had taken only a few more seconds to reach orbit. Being crushed seemed to be one of the most horrible ways to die. She was thankful she'd avoided it. However, she had a feeling, a tingling intuition, that a new danger was just around the corner. Surely, there would be more challenges now that they were traveling through the unforgiving sea of space. As they settled in for the ride, Phlox continued to translate Las Lasjas mission control's communication with the crew of the Dadao. There was a lot of discussion about the next stage of their journey and something they called the trans-lunar injection. "Beginning phasing maneuver," the ship's pilot said. Nix watched through the porthole as the spaceship adjusted its course. As the thrusters fired, she could see puffs of white vapor shooting from the hidden nozzles embedded in the sides of the spaceship. "Control, we're ready to fire the second stage." "Roger that, Dadao. Telemetry and tracking look good. Your go for the lunar injection." When Mouse heard that announcement, his expression changed. The look of fear was back in full force. "Wait, I almost forgot. They're headed to the moon." He pointed an accusing finger at Nix. "Which means, unless we stop them, we're going with them." "Yeah, that's the idea." Nix nodded calmly. "We're going with them." "What? Have you even thought about how we would get back?" "Yeah, we're going to settle in like mice. Enjoy the ride. Once we get to the moon, I'll explain to our most gracious hosts that we're commandeering this spaceship. We'll rescue Quinn and the astronauts, then the Dadao can fly us home." "Natalie, you've blown every damn high-tech circuit you have in that brain. Honestly, that may be true, but I can't stop thinking about how this crew is headed to the moon to murder a dozen American astronauts. One of whom is your best friend. That's not fair. God damn it. Your plan isn't a plan, it's just a vague wish list, Mouse said. He floated closer and wagged an accusing finger at her. I want to help Quinn too. I'm worried sick about Quinn, but dying in space isn't going to help her at all. Stop shaking that damn finger at me. I'm not shaking it on purpose. I'm freezing. Aren't you cold? Mouse was right. The temperature inside the cargo capsule had changed, and it was getting more frigid by the second. Flux, what's going on with the temperature? Nicks asked. Life support has been turned off in this capsule to conserve energy. Who turned it off? The Dadaoist crew commander. Can you turn it back on? We need some heat in here. Affirmative, belaying last command. Switching cargo module life support back on. Mouse, who could still hear Flux in his earpiece, rubbed his hands together. Thank God, Flux is a lifesaver, Nicks agreed. She'd hated her artificial intelligence assistant for the longest time. But nowadays, it was proving useful. As the Dadao crew finalized plans for the lunar injection, Nicks and Mouse strapped in. Seconds later, they felt the third-stage rocket fire rattling the cargo module. The burn lasted several minutes, increasing the velocity of the ship and orienting it on the proper flight path toward the moon. Outside the window, the Earth shrank in size. When an alarm sounded showing the stage was complete, the engine shut off and Mission Control confirmed the injection maneuver was successful. They were perfectly aligned with the proper flight path and on their way to the moon. For several minutes, everything seemed fine, until a second shrill alarm went off. A light flashed over Nicks's head. What the hell is that all about? Mouse wondered. Flux, what's the alarm for? Nicks asked. Mission Control has instructed the crew to check the cargo capsule. Life support is malfunctioning. Is it? Negative. I am controlling it now, overriding their commands. From their vantage point, such non-responsiveness may appear as a malfunction. Nicks hadn't considered that turning on the life support would expose her and Mouse, but it seemed the jig was up. The electronics on the hatch that joined the cargo capsule to the main one lit up like a Christmas tree. Several loud clangs echoed through the ship as the sound of gears and hidden mechanisms worked to open the hatch. The crew commander was coming through, and there was no time and no place to hide. It seemed her confrontation with the Dadao crew was going to happen ahead of schedule. 3 Chinese taikonauts, as they called themselves, gathered at the airlock, eagerly peering inside at their stowaways. Nicks and Mouse stared back, wondering how the impending confrontation might resolve itself. Maybe we can reason with them, Mouse whispered, his voice shaking. I don't think they're in a reasoning mood, she said. They just launched a billion-dollar space plane with the sole purpose of blowing up an American Moonbase. So what are we going to do? You're going to stall them, she said, pushing him forward, while I figure out how to subdue a bunch of angry astronauts and take over this spaceship. The first one, a stocky, bald man whose chest patch bore the name Li Wei, stared at Nicks with murder in his eyes. He directed his team with authority, making it obvious he was their commander. The second man was named Junlong. He floated forward and cracked open the hatch door so his third and final teammate could float through. Nicks saw right away that astronaut was female. Her chest patch identified her as Chow. Each of the taikonauts was dressed in black tactical spacesuits, ribbed with red cooling hoses, giving them the appearance of devilish space ninjas. Junlong held something akin to a crossbow. He slid a bulky clip into place and nodded at the commander. They were ready for a fight. But so was Nicks. Commander Li Wei pushed himself into the capsule. Still scowling at Nicks and Mouse, his shock and frustration were on full display. Flux translated his rant as he yelled, "Who are you people? And what the hell are you doing on my ship?" "Would you believe we're the cleaning crew?" Mouse asked, cocking an eyebrow. "No, we would not believe that," Junlong shouted. "It's obvious you are American spies, and you've been caught red-handed." Junlong cocked the handle of his weapon, and the clip loaded a metal bolt into a recessed groove along the stock. Nicks wasn't sure about firing weapons in zero gravity, but Mouse seemed to know the crossbow was a problem. He raised his hands in surrender and floated backward, allowing the Chinese crew more space to enter the module. "Surrender yourselves now," Xiao shouted, giving them a furious scowl. Nicks wasn't in a surrendering mood and decided she would have to fight. She pushed off the fuselage and launched herself across the capsule straight toward Junlong. When she was close enough, she swung her fist down, knocking the weapon out of his hand. The crossbow spun in a circle, floating conveniently near her. When she reached out, hoping to take control of it, Li Wei anticipated her move and grabbed her by the hair, yanking her off course. She cartwheeled in zero gravity, past the other astronauts, kicking and punching, but failing to connect with either of them. The crew's proficiency at dodging her first strike made it clear she had underestimated their strength. Fighting in zero gravity differed from fighting on Earth, and, exhausted from the launch crisis, she was moving slower and with less power. As Nicks recovered from her out-of-control spin, Chow produced a new device that Nicks guessed was a remote control. Chow pointed it toward the back of the cargo capsule. The wall lit up, and a section of it retracted, revealing another airlock and a smaller compartment beyond that. The Didao's computerized voice announced, "Escape pod primed, electronics and life support coming online." Chow put away the remote control and took out another weapon. It was like the crossbow, but larger and longer, like a rifle with a reel of wire mounted under its stock. She loaded it with an expertise that said she'd trained for this 100 times. When it was ready, she tossed it to Li Wei, who was waiting for it with open hands. He snatched it as it floated over, then turned it on Nicks. "Get in that pod," Li Wei commanded. "We are detaining you both until we decide how to handle your egregious attempt at sabotage." He then directed Junlong to flank Nicks. The two men circled around her in a coordinated effort, one from the right and the other from the left. Junlong, who had control of his weapon again, lined up a shot. Nicks pushed off the nearest wall to avoid him. As she did, Li Wei fired his gun. The bolt hit her hard in the right thigh with a sickening thunk. Nicks screamed. It felt as if someone had stabbed her with a hot poker. She reached down and grabbed the bolt, now buried a few inches into her right leg, and that's when Junlong fired a second one, which hit her in the left arm. Nicks screamed again, but the pain in her leg was the real problem and almost unbearable. Li Wei's bolt had a long metal wire attached to it, and he had activated a motorized reel that was reeling her in like a fish. While Junlong and Li Wei grappled with Nicks, Chow launched herself like a human missile across the capsule toward Mouse, who was crawling along the fuselage, desperately searching for a place to hide. In a flash, Chow tackled Mouse around the waist, and they tumbled end over end, grappling fiercely. Under normal conditions, and because of her bionic power, Nicks would have taken the astronauts out rather easily. But the confines of the capsule and the lack of gravity were putting her at a disadvantage. Wrapping her hand around Li Wei's wire, she began a tug-of-war with the man, fighting against him in the power of the motorized reel. "Natalie," Mouse pleaded. "Help!" Nicks turned to see Chow had Mouse in a headlock. Somehow, she'd twisted herself around him despite Mouse's desperate attempts to shake her off. Chow added her other arm, tightening her grip into a perfect sleeper hold. Mouse began to choke and beg for air. Junlong aimed his pistol at Mouse. "Stop fighting, or we kill him," he commanded. Nicks saw Mouse was losing consciousness and raised her hands in surrender. "Good. Now put your hands behind you," Li Wei snapped. "We have no time for prisoners on this mission. You have two choices. We execute you both now and eject your remains into space, or you agree to be confined to the escape pod until the mission is over." Li Wei reeled the bolt's wire tighter to make a point. Nicks had no choice but to comply. Nicks looked at Li Wei, then at Mouse, then at the escape pod. She shrugged and offered her hands to Junlong. "You're not giving me much choice. I'm afraid you left all your choices back on Earth," Li Wei said. Junlun secured her with a pair of zip ties and aggressively ripped the bolts out of her arm and leg. Nicks suppressed another scream. Warm blood soaked her bicep and the pants leg of her suit. She looked down and saw bits of her bionics were exposed. This would take an expert repair. Junlong pushed her toward the pod. Large droplets of her artificial blood floated in a bubble trail behind her. Li Wei moved closer to Junlong and hit her in the back with the butt of his bolt rifle. "Move it, spy," he growled. Nicks snapped forward. She tried not to react, not yet, at least. When Junlong pushed her again, Nicks knew both men were close enough to grab. She snapped the zip ties with her bionic power and spun around. Grabbing Junlong by the neck with one hand and Li Wei with the other, she slammed the two men's heads together with considerable force. They doubled over, stunned and unconscious. She spun again and, using her momentum, threw Junlong toward the escape pod. Then she turned on a limp Li Wei, kicked the rifle out of his hands, grabbed him by the wrist, and catapulted him into Junlong. Next, she turned on Chao. But Mouse was one step ahead. Taking advantage of the confusion, he cocked one arm up and slammed his elbow into Chao's chin. She let go of him. Mouse lunged for Junlong's bolt pistol, which spun weightlessly in a pirouette. His fingers fumbled for the handle, and it seemed it would spin away out of reach, but suddenly he was in control of it. He swung his arm around and aimed it at Chao, who was only a few feet behind him. Chao screamed an obscenity and launched herself straight for Mouse, flailing her arms and hands, trying to knock the gun away. Mouse fired, and the steel arrow shot out like a bullet, skewering her. The impact spun her backward into the wall. She clutched at the bolt that was now half buried in her shoulder. "I'll kill you," she seethed. Blood stained her suit around the wound. "Not if I kill you first," Mouse said as he cocked the gun for another shot. Chao moved as if she was going to charge him again. "Try it, and this one goes in your eye," Mouse threatened. The warning stopped her from advancing any further. Nick smiled. Mouse had some fire in him. "Will kill you, he really will, and won't feel an ounce of guilt about it," Nick lied. "Since you're so eager to murder his astronaut friends, just give him an excuse." Chao stared into Mouse's icy gaze, as if carefully deciding her last move. Nearby, Li Wei and Junlong floated motionless. They were both still unconscious. Nix got behind them and pushed them closer to the escape pod. "Seems you have two choices," Mouse said sarcastically. He floated forward and cocked the trigger with a metallic click that made Chao shiver. "You can end up a shish kebab with a bolt in your eye, or you can get in the goddamn escape pod with your two buddies." Chao finally relented, moving to join the rest of her crew. Mouse followed close behind her, and Nix finished pushing the two men inside. They were coming around, so she kept her gaze fixed on them like a hawk. When Chao moved through the door, Mouse snatched the remote from her pocket. "Lock it down," Nix said. Mouse activated the remote, and the escape pod closed. The airlock door hissed into place. A green light lit up, apparently indicating the pod was sealed. Chao and Junlong cursed Nix and Mouse as cowards. After a minute of that, Li Wei calmed his team and floated up close to the pod window, trying his best to make one last appeal. "You have no idea what is waiting for you on the moon," he said. "There's a reason we were sent to destroy that base. The security of the world demands we carry out that mission. You're wrong. I do know what's on the moon. My friend, along with a team of American astronauts, is there, waiting for a rescue, and that's exactly what we intend to do." "Woman, you're a fool," Li Wei growled. "You can't pilot this ship without us, and there's no way in hell you're landing on the moon safely by yourself." "Well, if you would accept new orders, you could assist with the rescue mission. Will you help us?" "Help you?" Chao yelled. She was still foaming at the mouth. "We'd rather die." "Suit yourself," Nix said. She hit the button, priming the escape pod. The pod was pulled backwards and loaded into its launch tube. A new glass airlock panel sprung from some hidden mechanism sealing it in place. "Don't do that," Liwei yelled, eyeing the control panel nervously. She gave him a half-smile. "We appreciate the ride this far. Hope you make it back in one piece." "Wait, we can work this out," Chunlong begged. I don't think we can." Nicks slapped the release lever, and the escape pod's explosive bolts fired, severing it from the capsule. The pod shot backward, away from the Dadao. There was a jerk in the ship as its momentum was boosted forward, and the Chinese crew tumbled away in the inky black of space. Nicks felt glad to be rid of them, especially the vicious Chow. But as the pod disappeared, she searched within herself for a glimmer of peace and found only a cloud of new anxieties. Now they were most definitely on their own. Chapter 31. Luna 1. Margaret Quinn jolted awake, her head pounding against the cold, hard floor beneath her. The cell was dim, the air thick with the stale stench of sweat and fear. She blinked, trying to clear her head after the crash of the Persephone. Every muscle in her body screamed, but the pain was drowned out by the sound of a struggle nearby. Maria Gates, her fellow crew member, was being dragged out of the cell by two women. Gates's screams echoed off the walls, desperate and terrified, slicing through Quinn like a knife. "No!" Quinn shouted, forcing herself to her feet. She lunged toward the door, trying to pull Gates back, but she was too weak, her body battered and broken. The women tossed her aside with ease, sending her crashing back to the cold floor. "Maria!" Quinn's voice cracked as she watched her friend disappear down the hallway, her screams fading into nothing. The cell door slammed shut. Anger and desperation surged through her. She couldn't just sit here and do nothing. Ignoring the pain, she staggered to the door and started hammering on the control lockbox, trying to pry it open. Each hit sent a jolt of pain through her, but she kept at it. Maybe if she could knock the cover off, the switch could be rewired. A voice cut through the darkness, sharp and annoyed. "Stop fucking beating on that. It's giving me a headache. And it'll just bring them back to hurt us both." Quinn froze, her heart skipping a beat. She hadn't known anyone else was in the cell with her. She spun around, eyes wide, scanning the shadows. "Who are you?" she demanded. A figure shifted in the corner, leaning into the faint light. Quinn's breath caught. The woman was a mess. 2 black eyes, a swollen lip, and one arm in a makeshift sling. She looked like she'd been through hell and barely survived. "Katrina Green," the woman said. "Security specialist for Luna 1. Who the hell are you?" "Sergeant Maggie Quinn," she replied. "Where the bloody hell are we?" Green sighed, leaning back against the wall, her eyes closing briefly as if speaking took all the strength she had left. "Welcome to the nightmares, Sergeant. We're in deep shit, and if we don't play this smart, we're not getting out alive." Part 9. Moonhead. Chapter 32. 12 hours later. Nicks had always envisioned space travel as an awe-inspiring and life-altering experience. So far, it wasn't turning out that way. In fact, she was certain she could say with great authority that space travel actually sucked. The takeoff had been one big blur of severe fear and panic for both herself and Mouse, which was then succeeded by many hours of monotony. But a silver lining shined on the horizon. The moon was so close, they felt like they could reach out and touch it. The Apollo astronauts had taken 72 hours to reach the moon. The Dadao had done it much faster thanks to a much larger fuel tank and an extended injection burn. It seemed the Chinese were very eager to get to their destination and kill everyone at Luna 1. Despite the trip to the moon being quick, they had a lot of downtime to reflect on their preparation. Mouse had spent hours digging through the mission logs, reading every line of information. and reviewing the operating code in the spaceplane's system. Nicks had gone through the ship's gear. She'd also finally cracked open the munitions crate. It was filled with Shang-Fu's specialized bunker-buster bombs, strange projectiles with their own thrusters and advanced guidance systems. While they were safely sealed in the cockpit, Nicks watched in awe as Mouse hacked the controls, managing to open the cargo module and eject the munitions crate into space. It drifted away, set on a collision course for the far end of the solar system, where Nicks hoped it would explode harmlessly. With the crate gone, they now had more room to ferry the rescued astronauts home. After that, they dealt with her wounds. Luckily, Mouse knew her bionics well. He was able to stop the biocoolant leaks, repair the damage to her bionic arm and leg, and make a few adjustments to compensate for the change in gravity conditions. She'd lost some artificial skin, her batteries were low, and she wasn't 100% back in shape, but close enough. While all of this was going on, Flux helped them control the ship, teaching Mouse the basics along the way. Flux had also blocked all communication from Chinese ground control after an attempt was made to trigger a remote destruct sequence. Also, Flux translated and analyzed all the mission logs loaded on the Dawdao computer. Nicks combined this information with the DA's intel package and used her downtime to educate herself on the current space programs, both public and classified. Unlike the United States, where military missions fell under Space Force and civilian missions fell under NASA, all of China's space operations were controlled by the military, which was the People's Liberation Army. So far, China had completed multiple unmanned moon missions, including a landing on the dark side with the Chang'e 4 lunar rover. Future missions aimed at exploring the moon's south pole using 3D printing technology to establish their own Moonbase, and plans to explore to Mars. Had they now opted to leapfrog over the United States by taking an already established base? Nicks wasn't sure anymore. Perhaps that had been their original mission until Fang went rogue. Now it seemed Shang-Fu wanted to destroy the base, not take possession of it. The most important information Nicks found was about the Osiris and all of its high-tech capabilities. Unfortunately, Flux hadn't yet decrypted the deactivation key. This was a huge disappointment and a major concern. The Osiris would be an immense danger once they moved into lunar orbit. Eventually, the individual things Nicks and Mouse had been studying coalesced into a solid plan for landing on the moon. It was organized around 4 core tasks. First, Mouse worked hard to learn how to maneuver the Dawdao without any help from Chinese mission control or Flux. Second, they decided Nicks would handle the landing on the moon. She would go down to the surface while Mouse managed her descent from the Dawdao. Nicks dedicated her time to practicing how to fly the lunar lander, emphasizing its delicate nature, which necessitated only slight corrections. Flux explained that much of the process was already pre-programmed and automated. She just had to go along for the ride. Third, Mouse would try to write a malware program that would disable and confuse the Osiris. If they couldn't shut it down, perhaps they could cripple it in such a way that it would no longer pose a threat to Nicks as she attempted a landing. The final objective was the rescue. Nicks would use the rover, stored within the lander, to approach the base, then find the crew, rescue Quinn and the others, return that group to the lunar lander, then rejoin Mouse in orbit. The only missing piece was Space Force and their teammates in Reaper Force. There had been no communication from Vandenberg. "Why haven't they tried to contact us?" Nicks asked. "Flux was blocking communications from the Dawdao's mission control to protect us. Unfortunately, I think that's blocking all the good signals too," Mouse said, scratching his head. "I tried embedding a coded message in Flux's jamming signal, but I'm not sure Space Force will get it or even be able to decipher it. Honestly, I don't know what they could do to help us at this moment. Surely someone like Pembroke or Rollins is forming a backup plan. They know we're on the Dawdao. I told them as much before we boarded the cargo capsule. Also, there was the escape pod, programmed to return to Earth. Rollins and his group at Vandenberg would surely see that hurtling back home. Wouldn't they? We didn't exactly take the time to track the pod's trajectory. Well, that couldn't be helped. They were intent on killing us both. What I'm saying is that no one is coming to the rescue. We have to face facts. We are completely alone up here. Nicks nodded. She knew that was the case, and she knew it was her fault the two of them were in the predicament they were in. Still, she couldn't help but long for some kind of communication from Earth. I think the fact that we are floating out here all alone is driving me a bit bonkers. Mouse nodded. You'd think it wouldn't be like that. This should be the coolest thing a human could ever do. Mouse hit play on a computer tablet. The same K-pop song from his favorite group Pink Jeans had been playing on loop. Nicks, who had known zero Korean before the trip, now felt fluent in it and hated every word. "Give me that tablet," she said. Mouse had stuck it to the wall using Velcro, so she ripped it off and scrolled through the music collection. There were only a handful of songs that were familiar to her. "Can't believe the only music you've found on this thing is K-pop. If I hadn't, we'd have no music," he replied. "Wait! There's some rock here!" "Damn it, Mouse, you've been hiding this from me." Nicks flipped through the songs and chose one called "Wish You Were Here." The cabin filled with the sound of David Gilmour's remarkable acoustic guitar, and Nicks breathed a sigh of relief. "Oh, yeah," Mouse said, raising a finger. "I know this one. My grandmother plays it all the time." "Really?" "No, she's Korean and hates American music." That was a joke because this is such ancient stuff. Nicks laughed. "In my world, it's called a classic." As the music continued, Mouse suddenly became quiet. Nicks thought he was entranced by the song, but then he spoke up and said, "Natalie, come take a look. How amazing is this?" He motioned to her to approach the port side window of the cockpit. When she did, the entire frame was filled with the moon. It was a moment of awe-inspiring wonder. Neither of them spoke for the longest time. Nicks marveled at the things she'd stared at so many nights, camping with her Uncle Wilco. Out there in the wilderness, away from all the light pollution, the moon had looked so different, so beautifully detailed in that rocky mountain night sky. Now, here she was, hovering above it like a lost angel. Moon everywhere she looked. It was simply breathtaking. "I've been doing my research," Mouse said. "The Dad-Owl crew programmed a flight path that was distinctly different from the one the Persephone flew. They were hoping to avoid the Osiris?" "Yes, and so far there is no sign of it," Mouse said. "But I'm still working on a program to disable it just in case." That was a welcome relief. As they enjoyed the view, one dormant monitor on the command touchscreen came to life. A wireframe image of the moon's surface appeared, initiating a radar scanning program. The Dad-Owl's internal computers had been pre-programmed to scan the surface. Nicks and Mouse moved closer to watch as it worked. "What's it searching for?" Nicks asked. "The Moonbase would be my best guess," Mouse said. The Dad-Owl was now entering a pre-planned orbit around the moon. The scanning continued. After several minutes, there was a ping. The program had found something. "What is it?" Nicks asked, leaning over the console. "I guess I was wrong," Mouse said. "That's not a structure. That's something else." He tapped a control and the image zoomed in. "The Persephone," Nicks said. They stared at each other, happy to see the ship was indeed intact. Our intel was correct. Quinn and the rest of the crew must be alive. We have to get down there. "Do you feel ready?" Mouse asked. "Because I don't. Jesus, I really don't. But I'm going to save that location on the navigation computer. I can transfer it to the lander." Nicks floated over to the window, looking down, trying to identify the Persephone with her naked eye, and sure enough, there it was. Fear for Quinn and the other astronauts bubbled up like hot lava. "They've probably given up hope," she said. "What about their life support? Is it still working?" Hey, can we try and contact them? Calm down, Mouse said resolutely. His fingers danced across the control panel. One thing at a time. She took a deep breath. All the lectures she'd given Mouse about controlling his emotions played through her head. She needed to take her own advice and think things through one more time. Seeing the Persephone, Nicks knew they needed to call an audible. It was time to switch to Plan B. The Persephone would be their first stop. Those astronauts were likely in the most immediate danger. After that, they'd circle back and head to the Moonbase as originally planned. Mouse seemed to be on the same page. I think it's time, he said nervously. Now, while we still have the Persephone in sight. The lunar lander was accessed through a portal on the floor of the Dadao. Nicks swallowed hard, took another look at the Persephone wreckage, then pushed off and floated over to the hatch. After climbing inside, she flipped a few key switches that would soon be out of reach, then strapped into the pilot's seat and buckled the harness. Okay, hang tight, Mouse said. I'll secure the airlock from the other side, then get on the comms and we can work out what to do next. She looked back at him. She considered him one of the smartest people she knew, but that intelligence couldn't hide the concern in his eyes. He was trying his best to be brave, and he was showing a strong streak of courage, but she knew they were both in over their heads. It would be a miracle if they could pull this off alone. An utter miracle. Mouse paused, cleared his throat as if to say something, then decided against it. She nodded at him, understanding. He nodded back and shut the hatch, locking Nicks inside. It felt like a cold metal tomb for the longest time, until moments later, when Mouse engaged the batteries and began powering on the system. Suddenly, the panels before her lit up like a video game. Testing, testing, radio check. Mouse's velvety smooth voice came online. Nat, are you reading me in there? Copy that, loud and clear, Nicks responded. For the next several minutes they went through the checklist as if they'd done this 1,000,000 times, which they hadn't. Part of her wanted to scream, rip the hatch open and retreat to the Dadao. The larger part of her thought only of the other astronauts. She turned her head and scanned the barren world, waiting for her outside the lander's porthole windows. One of her best friends and teammates was trapped down there, doomed to die. It was not hyperbole to say she was the only hope for a rescue. When the checklist was complete, Mouse fell silent for a long beat. What's wrong? Nicks asked. Nothing, Mouse said. That's what's worrying me. I feel like I'm forgetting something. If it's important, you'd remember, she said. Your brain seems to be the best thing we've got going for us at the moment, so try not to stress. Just stay in the moment. Mouse sighed, blowing out his breath in a long, extended puff. Okay, we are go for descent. You ready? I'm not totally sure. Nicks checked her straps again, her body tensed. But let's do it anyway. Don't worry. This'll be a piece of cake with a cherry on top, Mouse joked. She laughed nervously. He did the same. Then she took a deep breath. Go for descent, she said. Mouse cleared his throat. On my mark. 3, 2, 1. Go! Everything around her vibrated with new urgency. Then there was a loud click and a series of resonant clangs as the mechanical moorings snapped back to release the vehicle from its restraints. The lunar lander broke free of the Dadao, and Nicks was moving. Through the portholes, it seemed that she was speeding away from the moon in the wrong direction. However, after several seconds it became clear that this wasn't accurate. In fact, she was descending at an incredibly fast rate, according to the control panel readings. It was then that Nicks caught sight of the UFO. It appeared off the starboard side, a thin silver object resembling a silver Christmas tree ornament, moving straight toward her. I have contact, she reported. Do you see it, Mouse? Negative, he replied. Is it on your radar? Yes and no. The signature is fading in and out. Try to point your main vehicle sensor in that general direction. It might strengthen the signal, and if you do that, it might relay it back to me so I can track it for you." Nicks made the adjustment. After a few seconds, Mouse confirmed it. "Yes, that's got to be the Osiris. There's no other explanation." Nicks stiffened, her mind racing, trying her best to remember all the details of maneuvering the lander. She was going to have to take evasive action if Mouse couldn't stop the damn thing. It had taken down the Persephone, and she didn't want to be next. "Okay, here goes Plan A," Mouse said. "Broadcasting the stand-down signal now." Despite the distance, Nicks's enhanced hearing picked up the ultrasonic pulse. To her, it sounded like a cartoon machine gun, quick pulses of distorted pings. Tat-tat-tat-tat-tat. Tat-tat-tat. She saw the Osiris changing its shape, but not its speed or trajectory. "It's still coming, Mouse. Try Plan B. And fast," she yelled. The movement of the Osiris was unusual. It reminded Nicks of watching a large school of fish in the ocean, or even a flock of birds, tightly grouped, its individual parts adjusting in changing patterns in unison. Every few seconds, the shape of the thing expanded or contracted, making it appear as if it was a living machine. Mouse modulated the frequency and amplified the broadcast. The pulse of the stand-down code quickened and intensified. The Osiris changed shape more frequently. It was so fast and dramatic, it looked like the machine was breathing. The formation of the individual drones tightened, then expanded, ballooning out. Then it would contract and do it all over again. It was as if the machine was exerting itself as it flew toward Nicks, breathing heavier the faster it moved. "It's speeding up," Nicks yelled. The stand-down signal wasn't working. Mouse tried again, giving the broadcast full power. The Osiris seemed to speed up once again. It was coming straight for her. Nicks took manual control. Continuing along the pre-programmed trajectory would result in the Osiris taking her out. She was going to have to outmaneuver it by speeding up her descent. Even though that would put her in more danger, it seemed the only way. She slammed the guidance controller forward, forcing the lander into a sharp and more severe descent. In the process, she lost the ability to fine-tune her steering, but gained speed. The Osiris morphed again, changing its shape. Like a bird of prey, it dove headlong, straight after her, matching the severity of her descent. Nicks pushed the stick forward again, burning the descent engine more dramatically and increasing her velocity. Her foe was on her heels, coming closer, regaining its shape as it recalibrated its trajectory. Seeing the swarm of machines momentarily confused by her course change gave Nicks a new idea. It was one trick they had considered, but then vetoed because it meant losing a valuable piece of equipment. However, Nicks saw no other way at the moment. She reached over and slapped the release lever, ejecting the lunar rover. She heard several metal clicks and clacks, and then the loss of weight was apparent. She shot forward as the rover tumbled away behind the lander. Whether the Osiris intended to or not, the clustered machines swarmed the rover, engulfing it in a metallic cloud like a monster swallowing its prey. Her ground transport was gone, but the rover had served its purpose, acting as a decoy and stalling the attack long enough for her to escape. Now there was a new problem. She was coming in too hot. The lander rocketed toward the moon's surface at an unmanageable pace. Nicks struggled with the controls. The finer steering had little effect at this accelerated speed. In the distance, she saw a section of the surface that seemed relatively clear of any abnormal obstacles. It was a long, flat field. Proximity alarms blared. She was off course and totally out of control. Even though it was too late, she hit the thrusters and fired everything the lander had, trying to slow her descent. It wasn't enough. And then everything from that point forward was a blur. The lander hit the surface, bounced once, came back down hard again, bounced again, then teetered over and tumbled end over end until it finally skidded to a halt, sending a plume of rock, dust, and debris up like a tiny mushroom cloud. Mouse's scrambled voice came over the radio, anxiously begging for a response. Nothing but alarms blared back. Chapter 33. Vandenberg Space Force Base. Colonel Jack Byrne paced between the rows of computer terminals at Vandenberg Mission Control. The room was on full alert, tracking the trajectory of the Chinese space plane called the Dadao. Men and women at their workstations monitored with rapt attention, trying their best to ignore the large, angry, muscular soldier still in his black tactical gear from his previous mission. "I can't believe she did it," Byrne growled. Surely something knocked one of her screws loose. What the hell was she thinking? She was thinking about saving those astronauts and our teammate Quinn. Fatima Nasrallah snapped back. Something no one else on this team seems to care about. Byrne spun on his heels and pointed a finger at Fatma's face. "Watch that tone, Nasrallah. We all care about saving Maggie and the rest of those astronauts, but we could have done this a better way. Given more time to plan." "That's the point. There was no time," Fatima barked. "But Natalie made the best decision she thought she could," Rollins said, stepping between Fatima and Byrne. Byrne looked at Rollins, then again at Fatima, and threw up his hands. "Has everyone on this goddamn team gone nuts?" Byrne groaned. "Natalie and Mouse are on a Chinese rocket headed to the moon. There's no coming back from that." "It's a space plane, actually," Rollins said, "and it is designed to come back." Byrne pushed Rollins aside, nearly knocking him over, and resumed his pacing, trying his best to calm down. "What the hell was she thinking?" he shouted. Byrne knew Natalie Nicks was prone to these kinds of reckless actions. He'd been frustrated by it so many times before. But this felt different. This was out of control and seemed to him a fatal mistake. The extraordinary circumstances were beyond his comprehension and light years past his comfort zone. 3 of the people he cared about the most were likely dying on the moon, and he had no conceivable way of doing anything about it. Before, he'd always reassured himself with thoughts of being able to back his team up. He had the authority to call in reinforcements, an arsenal of state-of-the-art weapons and his own cybernetic powers at his disposal. But now, both Mouse, Maggie, and Natalie were all out of his reach. No way to help any of them. They were truly on their own. Fatima grabbed him by the arm and he turned around. "Look. It doesn't help arguing about how this happened," she said, her voice more soothing than he'd ever heard it. "What's done is done. Now it's time to make sure our team survives, gets home, and completes the mission." Byrne nodded. "However fucking nuts it might be," she added. Byrne allowed himself a smile. Then Fatima put an arm around him and gave him half a hug. It was shocking, awkward, and touching all at the same time. Fatima never showed emotion. "We'll get them home," she whispered. "Somehow, we always do." A young audio specialist jogged up to Byrne, breathless, with wide eyes, as if he couldn't believe what he was reporting. "Colonel, we've picked up an incoming message on one of the Dadao's transmission frequencies." Byrne followed the man as they raced back to his desk. The rest of the team gathered around as the message played. The engineer explained, "Whoever sent this embedded a code within the signal. At first we thought it was corrupted, but then we realized the sender knew his transmission was being jammed. That jamming signal repeats every 10 seconds, leaving a brief space for something to break through. Here's what we have so far." The message was garbled and incoherent, but to the ears of Reaper Force, it was a beautiful revelation. Mouse's voice, while distorted, was discernible in brief fragments. "Commandeered the Dadao, over. In lunar orbit now. Persephone intact. No contact with weapon. In need of rescue." Byrne felt overwhelmed with a jumble of emotion. First, relief that his friends were still alive, amazement that they'd made it to the moon. Finally, complete and utter despair when Mouse called for help. Fatima, who was never emotional, looked at Byrne with tears welling in her eyes. This made him twice as upset. He tried to calm himself and process what had been said. "That was all the audio we could salvage, sir. I'm sorry." Byrne gave the engineer a quick nod. "I'm sure you did your best. But try again. Go over it beat by beat, clean it up. Then clean it up again. We need to know what's going on up there." "Yes, sir. I'll work on it until we're sure it's absolute." "The Persephone is intact," Fatima said. "Let's focus on that for a minute. Does that mean Nicks was right? Is the crew of the Persephone alive?" "Not if the Osiris hit them and they crashed," Rollins said. "It seems impossible." "Improbable, but not impossible," Fatima countered. "You have two sources of information now, confirming that very fact." "Two unsubstantiated sources," Rollins argued. The young engineer interrupted again. "Sir, there's a new transmission from Agent Park." Byrne and the team turned back around, and the engineer cued the transmission. "Viper descending to surface. Osiris attacked. Possible damage to the lander." A piercing tone pulsed on and off, overwhelming the speakers intermittently, and the transmission ended. "A coded message on repeat," the engineer said. The audio played over the speakers for all of Mission Control to hear. Then it stopped and was replaced by static, indicating that the signal had been jammed once again. "What is that?" Fatima asked. "Morse code," Byrne said. "SOS. It's Mouse letting us know they need help," Fatima said. Byrne turned to Rollins. "You have to launch another rescue mission, and you need to do it now." "Are you out of your mind?" Rollins exclaimed. "Do you have any concept of what that kind of operation takes?" "Yeah, I do," Byrne said, stepping up closer to Rollins. He was gripping the edge of the metal desk, his knuckles white. "I saw the Chinese do it, catching your entire team off guard, about 12 hours ago. They were doing that in secret, violating every space law and treaty we have on the books. They did it because they had the resolve to act in a moment of crisis. Something, it seems, I'm embarrassed to say, you don't have. Look, I like Natalie Nicks and your team, but Colonel, you don't have authority here. And there is no way in hell the higher-ups are going to authorize a rescue mission." There was a crunch of metal, and Rollins looked down. Byrne kept his eyes level, but Rollins couldn't help but stare. Byrne was bending the end of the metal desk with his bare hands, crumpling it like it was a piece of notebook paper. Rollins' eyes widened like dinner plates. Fatima leaned in past Byrne, getting up in Rollins's face with the most nasty, intimidating scowl she could muster. "Unless you missed it, we're not asking the higher-ups. We're asking you, Flyboy. You going to help us or not?" Chapter 34. The Moon. Natalie Nicks looked up at Earth, beautiful and alive with its ocean blue and gauzy white swirls. It sat there, somewhere far beyond her, beckoning her home. Home to her little dog, Gizmo, to Uncle Wilco, and to all those who loved her. She thanked God, who she believed had saved her ass during her descent. She couldn't believe she was still alive. Thank goodness the Chinese had built a pretty sturdy lunar lander. She'd banged it up pretty good. Looking through the porthole, she confirmed the damage to the exterior was significant. The descent engine and its thruster assembly were crumpled, and part of it was missing. An icy chill ran through her. There was no way this vehicle would get her back to the Dadao. Hopefully, another form of transport waited for her at the Moonbase. At least, that was the hope she would cling to at this moment. In the distance, she could see pieces of the craft spread across the surface. One bell-shaped piece of metal seemed to be the radio antenna that had sat on top of the lander like a Christmas ornament. This had to be the reason she couldn't contact Mouse. As she fiddled with the radio, hoping against hope she could get a signal, a shrill, computerized voice announced, "Warning! Capsule depressurization imminent. Warning!" She heeded the alarm and quickly moved into the airlock hatch, where her spacesuit and helmet hung ready for use. Following a crude diagram, she put it on. As she adjusted the final clamp, there was a concerning creak and groan from the docking hatch side of the lander. Nicks swiveled and scanned the area for problems. She couldn't see any obvious issue, but the metal continued to creak and groan. Was some part of the vehicle's skin failing? It surely sounded that bad. She cleared the hatch, resealed it, locked it with the sealing lever, waited for the depressurization process to take effect, then opened the outer door and descended the ladder to the surface. As she stepped onto the last rung of the ladder, she couldn't help but mutter Armstrong's words that she'd heard 1,000,000 times before. "One small step for this woman," she said with a slight edit, "and one giant leap for womankind." Moonwalking wasn't as elegant as Michael Jackson made it seem during his iconic dances, but it was fun, especially for a woman who had the benefit of bionic legs. Nicks bounded forward in ever-increasing leaps, careful to check whether her suit could sustain the extra pressure she was putting on the boots. Once it seemed the suit would hold up, she let herself test how high she could jump. It was the most fun she'd had in the longest time. Soon, she'd gone what seemed to be miles from the lander. On the horizon, she saw wreckage and hoped it was the Persephone. No such luck. It was the lunar rover she'd jettisoned during her descent. It had taken damage from the Osiris that attacked her, as well as more damage from impacting on a ridge of sharp rocks. The ridge had severed it like a knife. Half of the machine was on one side, and the other had slid down into a dark crater on the other side. There'd be no way she'd be able to repair it. Nicks continued walking and came to the edge of another ridge that dipped down a few meters, then climbed back up a gentle slope to an even higher ridge. She backed up, got a running start, and jumped. Once again, it felt like she was flying, and when she finally came down, she'd cleared most of the ravine. She was now halfway up the other side. It only took a few more leaps to make it to the peak. There, she had a much more expansive view of the landscape. She turned around, looking for the wreckage of the rover, and couldn't find it. She scanned the vista for any evidence of where she'd come from and realized so much of this strange terrain looked the same to her eyes. Not being able to find the rover, her lander, or even any glimpse of the Persephone worried her. Slowly, a strange type of panic crawled up her spine. Being lost might not have been a major problem if there had been a breathable atmosphere, but she depended on the oxygen in her pressure suit for survival, and that oxygen was running out. She couldn't lie to herself. Not here. Not now. She was completely lost. The moon seemed like an alien desert, sunless, devoid of anything living. There were no animals, no birds, no insects. With no atmosphere, there was no wind, and certainly there was nothing to smell but her own musty scent collecting in the pressure suit. What she heard was the muffled crunch of her feet in the regolith, the moon's sandy surface, and the sound of her own breath and the oxygen hissing from the suit's rebreather mechanism. Her breath became more forced and rapid now that she was pushing herself toward the ridge, hoping for what was beyond its craggy wall. Then, just when she was on the verge of doubting her plan, she found the Persephone. Its metal fins, glinting in the sun's light, were hidden among the ridges of another deep ravine some 100 meters straight ahead. The space plane had been made well. Most of it was still intact. Its stainless steel fins glittered through a layer of the gray-brown regolith that had dusted most of the vehicle. Nicks bounded closer, but once the ship was within reach, she couldn't find an easy way to enter it. This was a dilemma. She needed shelter and had to get inside. With her bionic power, she could most likely break in by force, but what then? Any damage to the structure would put her in further jeopardy. She needed to use her brain, not her brawn, and find a means of entering the structure without destroying it. Surely there was one. Finally, she found an access point next to the docking compartment, but the airlock rings looked damaged. It seemed some kind of explosion had bent them outward, making it impossible to close properly. Still, she squeezed through the hole, since it seemed the best way inside. A red light in the wreckage's corner blinked. She didn't know what it was, but she was glad to see the vehicle still had some power left. Long, dark burns covered much of the interior. She wasn't sure why. She prayed there hadn't been a fire. If so, was that the reason for the explosion? No matter. She had to turn what was left into a shelter that would allow her to recharge her suit. Even if she wasn't able to restore full power to the Persephone, she hoped there was enough stored oxygen to pressurize part of the ship. When she moved past the airlock into the crew cabin of the spaceplane, she noticed there was a still functional door that would allow her to seal off the forward crew module along with the cockpit from the aft compartments. Examining it closely, it was still intact, with no obvious damage. She locked it off. Seconds later, she heard the hiss of gas. Oxygen, she hoped. An alarm sounded, and an announcement declared the internal cabin pressurized. Nicks sat down and took off her helmet with great relief. She was completely exhausted, so tired, in fact, she was falling asleep. She just needed to rest her eyes for 5 minutes. That was all. Then she'd get back at it. Maybe the rest would allow her to contemplate a more effective plan for getting into Luna 1. She sat in the commander's chair and tilted her head against the wall. It was uncomfortable as hell, but she didn't care. She thought about what to do. Surely there were tracks to follow? And those tracks would lead to the safe entrance of the base. But what then? All of those problems would be solved in due time. First, a quick nap. Chapter 35. Natalie Nicks slipped off to sleep and dreamt about, of all things, an astronaut party. Men in brightly colored spacesuits set up a grill and a volleyball net right outside the Persephone. Someone brought over a plate of hamburgers and hot dogs, while another man used a mechanical torch to light the charcoal. There was music playing. Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd, of course. But that quickly faded as one of Mouse's annoying K-pop songs started up. She turned around and saw him in a blue suit, DJing the party from a console set up near an inflatable pool. Mouse, thank God he was okay. She waved to him and caught the attention of 2 very sexy female astronauts who had drawn bikinis on their pressure suits. They were laughing at the absurdity of keeping the inflatable pool full of water. A beach ball rocketed into the sky and floated away. What a great party, she thought, and dozed off a bit more. In this part of the dream, the party was crashed by some unwelcome astronauts who insisted on knocking things over, banging their fists on everything within reach, and basically spoiling the good vibe. Can't we have anything nice? Even on the damn moon? Now they were pounding on the door to the Persephone's crew cabin. They wanted in, but she was way too comfortable to get up and oblige. She wasn't sure she could anyway. That thing was so perfectly locked into its slot, it would take some serious force to break the seal. Surprising no one, that's exactly what the astronauts did. The airlock suddenly opened as if someone were ripping an aluminum can in two, and the men entered. They stood near her, pointing. "Hey, sister, where the hell you come from?" "Huh?" one astronaut asked. Nicks smirked and gestured up, not really sure how to point to Earth. "Well, no shit," the other one said. "But how'd you get here?" Disappointment morphed into relief. This wasn't a dream, and certainly not a backyard barbecue. No, this was a rescue, thank God. That assessment seemed to fit until she realized they weren't too concerned with her comfort. They grabbed her roughly, manhandled her through the crew cabin, and once outside the ship, they pulled her through the powdered regolith like a hunter might drag his prey off to be butchered. Eventually, she was strapped to the back of some kind of vehicle, the mast of which rose with a long, glittering fabric, giving it the appearance of a sail. Suddenly, they were all moving with purpose. But she wasn't in the right frame of mind or in the right physical shape to even care about the destination. She lay there, content to go along for the moment, too woozy to raise her head. Was she drunk? How'd that happen? No matter. There were men. Other men on the moon. That was something, wasn't it? Nicks noticed the word minor, along with 3 random digits stenciled across the pressure suit the nearest man was using. This clue didn't fully explain her situation, but she decided not to question her fortune, considering she needed all the help she could get at the moment. As they sailed across the moon's surface, Nicks felt like she was living a bizarre version of Snow White. A group of little moon men were carrying her away to their hidden home. Who were these guys? The journey, lasting over 10 minutes, took them through the jagged terrain's switchbacks, ending at a crater's far end. There, a large airlock door, capable of admitting a truck, was set into a moon mountain's side. The door blended seamlessly with the rock, hinting at a cave repurposed as an entrance. After some arguing and cussing with people on the other side of the airlock, explaining their actions in the presence of a strange female, the airlock finally opened, and the group moved inside. 2 men manually closed the large door, and the chamber pressurized. Oxygen hissed as a needle on an oversized pressure gauge bobbed before settling in the green zone, signaling it was safe to remove their helmets and gloves. Nicks eagerly followed suit. The air smelled unusual, but Nicks breathed it in deeply, like someone gasping for air after being underwater. Attempting to stand, she swooned from dizziness and had to sit back down. "Nitrogen narcosis, no doubt about it," one man commented. "Or one of the witch's tricks," said another. "Not much of a trick, look at her. She can't even stand." Another man with rough hands grabbed her wrist, checked her pulse, and waved an oxygen mask in front of her face. She nodded, and he placed the mask over her nose and mouth, securing it with a strap. The cool stream of air helped her breathe easier. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Nicks," she wheezed. "Natalie Nicks. Well, Natalie, not sure how you ended up on the moon, but you're safe now." "I'm grateful for your help," she slurred. She looked around at the men who were now circling her, studying her as if they had never seen a woman before. "What is this place, and who are you guys?" she asked. An alarm sounded overhead, accompanied by a red strobe light. Seconds later, the inner airlock door opened, but the men stayed focused on Nicks. "Help her up and escort her to quarantine." "Quarantine. Just a precaution," he assured her. "Our outpost has been isolated for a long time. We're not sure if our immune systems are compromised or if we might compromise yours. It's best to proceed cautiously." He tugged at his beard nervously, glancing back and forth at the surrounding men. The men seemed to avert their gazes as well. She realized they were not disclosing the entire truth. They were avoiding a specific topic or concealing some fact. She couldn't pinpoint what it was, but it appeared to be related to the quarantine room. The more it was mentioned, the more uncomfortable everyone became. As her eyes grew heavy again, a bad vibe overtook her. Something was amiss. She just didn't know what. That concludes this part of Moonbase Rogue. We hope you've enjoyed this presentation. Please like and subscribe and follow this channel to get the next installment of this exciting story. Visit Mark at JonesMarkC on all the socials for additional information and links to other free audiobooks and the next book in this series. Until next time, thank you for listening.